Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February 8th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting. Secretary, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mark Barry,
Present.
Andy Duran,
Present.
Ann Hill, present. Amy Connell Donahue,
Present.
Lauren Hirsch,
Present.
Tim Penich,
Present.
Carrie Steinbach.
Present.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to move right on forward into the public comment. Bear with me for a minute as I make some announcements about this. At every meeting of the board, we offer two options for public comment, one at the beginning of the meeting and one towards the end. We welcome comments from our staff, parents, and constituents. As I mentioned earlier tonight, because we are expecting quite a bit of public participation and in line with Board Policy 2.230, we are respectfully requesting that all comments be kept to a 2-minute time limit rather than the standard time of 3 minutes. This is being done so that we can proceed into the discussion and presentation portion of our agenda at a decent hour. This is a very important conversation this evening, and we know many people in our audience are looking forward to Dr. Leali's presentation and the ensuing open discussion among our board members. As this requires careful consideration, we are shortening the time limit so that the maximum number of people can be heard. We will remind speakers when their time is up. We'll also remind the audience that this public comment period is a time for members of the public to express their views and is not intended to be a conversation with the board. The board will listen, but will not respond or engage in dialogue. We are all here to make good decisions for our community, and respectful discourse is necessary to that process. Please also remember that regardless of your stance on masking, we are still under an indoor mask mandate in the state of Illinois. So we ask that you wear a mask while you are inside the building here at Village Hall. Thank you very much for your compliance. When you begin your comments, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address for the record. So we can get started with the people in the room. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to approach the board with a public comment? Go ahead, Michael.
Good evening. My name is Michael Mocknicky, and I am a resident of Lake Bluff at 12596 Meadow Circle. During our last meeting, I primarily focused on the most important issue at hand, the documented evidence that masking our children has a negative effect on their mental and physical health, as well as their social, emotional, and linguistic development. I also reminded you that you know and we know that the masks universally forced upon our children have no effect of preventing the transmission of any virus. And to any of those with a knee-jerk reaction of wanting to move to requiring N95 or KN95 respirators as some kind of pivot to desperately salvage a narrative, I remind you that we see right through that nonsense. Such a recommendation will not be tolerated by this community, and I'm very proud of that. Regarding the legal decision from this past Friday, on February 4th, Sangamon County Judge Grishaw ruled that the emergency mask mandate and guidance from the governor, IDPH, and ISB are void. The mask mandates in our school are illegal. No authority exists under the law to mandate masks in our schools for children or for staff without due process. As stated by the judge, non-named plaintiffs and school districts throughout the state may govern themselves accordingly. We, the parents, are informing District 65 board members and administration that we expect you to follow the law as declared by Judge Grishaw. Forced masking and excluding children from school for close contact cannot be requested or enforced by our schools without giving the child or a staff member due process under law. It was made clear that the mandates by the governor and state health agencies were deemed unlawful for the named students. And if they are unlawful for named students, they are unlawful for all students. Any legal defense of the initial mandates has been voided. If District 65 chooses to continue the universal mask mandates and close contact quarantines, you are knowingly breaking the law and exposing yourself to significant liability. Parents in our community are ready to take immediate legal action, including but not limited to filing civil rights violation claims. Based on tonight's, not knowing tonight's COVID update, I sincerely hope that our community can avoid such action. The time for adhering to guidance from government officials in Springfield and Chicago has passed. The time for listening to your hearts and asking yourselves, not some acronym, what's best for our children and our community has come. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. There's no particular order, so anybody that would like to go next, we do have Renee Boyle with a slip up here. Renee, if you want to go next.
Hi, I'm Renee Boyle, and I live at 402 East Prospect. I have two daughters, a sophomore and an eighth grader at the middle school. I just want to say that I was in the car with my sophomore and a bunch of her sporty friends on Saturday going to a movie. And the stress they were under to unmask their face on Monday was incredible. I got braces off. I haven't seen so-and-so. Some of these kids haven't seen other children's faces since eighth grade. And because the communities are so intertwined, Lake Forest and Lake Bluff, the kids' activities for the younger kids, sports, church, you name it, they're gonna be in contact. So without being political, I just think socially, emotionally, it's time. And if Lake Forest has the opening, I think we should join in for our kids. So many of us had COVID. My mother didn't die from COVID. She got sick. We got side slammed by a family member and 15 members got sick. We passed it to families. They passed to families and they weren't vaccinated. And one had a cold and it could have been prevented. But we need to protect our children here in this community. I don't think COVID is going to kill them. And hopefully they'll be sensitive to elders, people with disabilities, people with asthma, whatever their comfort level is. I think our children can rise to the occasion to look outside the mask, no mask, and know that COVID is real, but have the education and the support of their family to make their own choice. And that's what this is about, I think. I think it's time for the families to choose what's best. And also, there was never a better choice for us than Lake Bluff schools. We looked at them all. And I'm still so appreciative to all the people that work and volunteer and have done everything to help our kids. And I think this is the next step. Thank you
Okay.
for your time.
If you'd like to speak, please feel free to come up to the top or to the podium. Please remember to state your name and your address if you don't mind.
My address. I'm Allison Graff. If it's okay with you, I actually want to read a letter. My friend who is deployed overseas, he's got children at Lake Bluff, and I think what he has to say is pretty relevant. I just want to start off by saying thank you to all the teachers and staff for their commitment, dedication to keeping our children safe. Your dedication to the profession of education will never go unnoticed and is never underappreciated. I write this letter from Europe as I was quickly called away due to the diplomatic and military events currently unfolding. Please take a moment to place our community in perspective, comparing it to what is happening in many places around the world. We should never forget how fortunate we are to call Lake Bluff our home. My words are not to diminish the genuine concerns of families within our community, but instead to find a middle ground. Let me be clear, I want a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. As this pandemic has progressed, so has our mitigating policies and protective measures. Scientific studies and data should continue to drive our critical thinking as to the best ways and means to adapt our policies. If the new concern is the mask mandates, then there needs to be a reasonable discussion as to the overwhelming benefit of continuing to mask a demographic that has shown very small risk thus far. The infection numbers are not trivial and no one should consider this an easy matter. The CDC confirms that cloth masks are the least protective option for mask wearing, and yet that is exactly the main mitigation tool that has been used for our children these last few years. If it is a least effective tool, then is it actually more of a distraction? Should we be dedicating efforts to portable air purifiers and hand washing? Let's also be honest. Once families are home, they are not wearing masks nor social distancing. Without passing judgment on how families view the issue of wearing masks, can we all agree that it should at least be optional wear? No one should remove anyone's choice to wear a mask, and we should expect our kids to be occasionally sick this time of year, no matter what measures we take due to the historical nature of flu season. May our children move on from these last few years worth of seclusion, quarantine, and frustration to get back to being kids. In the classroom, we are losing the smiles, facial expressions, and the individual quirks that make them unique. Dr. Leali and Principal Kelly love our kids as they are truly amazing at what they do. But have our kids ever been able to experience their smiles firsthand? Very respectfully, Chris Jackson.
Thank you.
Hello, Catherine Marsubian, 232 East Sheridan Road. My name is Catherine Marsubian. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight. I did not know this lawsuit existed, but I would have gladly added my family to the list. If I did, would we be in a different position today? Does that only take one person to take a stand? I cannot let that opportunity for necessary change to pass me by again. In past communications from the district, it was stated that, quote, "We recognize there continue to be mixed emotions and beliefs on this topic," end quote. And recognizing, quote, "that the very strong feelings on this issue for many of our residents and that our families are not aligned in their thinking about how we should approach mitigation of COVID at this time," end quote. Given that it is so controversial, the right decision is to make masks optional. Let the families that believe that they are effective send their kids to school with masks, and let those who believe they are a detriment to learning, mental health, and building an effective immune system go mask-free. If the board continues forward with the current protocols, then I ask you when? When will our kids breathe freely again? Every decision has a risk reward that needs to be evaluated. And at this point, after 2 years with increased herd immunity, dwindling positivity rates, and a weak virus, why are our kids still in masks? Please help us understand why masks can't be optional. Is it about safety? With 99% survival rate and an increase of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, delayed learning, and social emotional regression, I fear that there has been more damage caused than children saved. What is the current herd immunity rate at each of our schools? Take the number of vaccinated kids with the number whom have recovered from COVID and have natural immunity. Where are we? Are we in the 50s, 80s, higher? Would knowing that number ease some of the parents' concerns? With a 5-day quarantine, what would the new threshold be like for switching to remote? There are 40 plus other states in our country that do not require masks in schools, whom we can tap into for guidance on how to stay open and staffed. 2 years later, I never thought my kids would still be masked. In fact, they don't know school any differently. This is our chance to lead the way and to make a change and a difference for the families of Lake Bluff. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Podium is open if anyone would also like to approach. Okay, do we have anybody on Zoom? With the hand raised? If you'd like to make a comment on Zoom, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And we'll bring you into the meeting. Shelley, can you see?
Do you have the ability to promote her to a panelist? Oh, we got it. Okay, here she is. Thank you.
Hi, Christine, you're on with the board.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't know there was a time limit, so I'll try to make this quick. My name is Christine Schleid and I live at 612 Rockland Avenue. My son and I just moved here from the state of Washington. I'd like to just point out a couple of scientific things. So we know that although science is still learning about aerosol virus transmission, it is agreed upon by scientists and doctors across the world that any respiratory illness, even COVID-19 and others, can be transmitted through the air. We're still, Omicron variant B was just reported in Illinois just a couple of weeks ago. And so we know that we're not at the complete end of our current phase COVID cycle. And hospitals in our area locally are still at or over capacity. And consider, not just children getting sick from COVID, but children passing it around, wearing masks or not masks, to family members or family to family members or such to the community, and what kind of strain that might give to hospitals. I've read a lot of articles. There isn't any scientific evidence that wearing a mask does affect a child's health, but it does probably have a similar effect to watching TV or tablets, in that they're reducing those interactions and learning those social cues by looking at faces. And so I'd just like to ask the board to consider to continue to protect our community and our students, to continue to allow the wearing of masking until we can better understand the virus or come up with some sort of data constraint to know that it might be safer, maybe, a reduced transmission rate within our county or zip codes. And then when our hospitals are at a better, are in a better situation.
Thank you, Christine. Shelley or Nate, anyone else on Zoom?
Dr. Ollie asked me to read one of the comments, though, that was posted in the chat, so I'll do that. This is from Lauren. I'd like to comment that these generalizations are unfair and inaccurate. My family has been social distancing and send our children to school in KN95 masks, which have been proven to protect against the virus.
Thank you. Thank you for
Andy,
putting that.
Andy, may I make a comment?
Sure, Mark.
Can we, somebody explain, we have a very huge viewing audience on Zoom, and some of these folks may not be sure what you mean by please raise your hand because they may want to speak. Can somebody talk to that and how that actually works?
Sure. Do the best I can without looking at it. If you're on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen when you're on the webinar, you should be able to see a hand, a little hand icon that says raise hand. If you click that, we will get notified on our end. If you're having trouble with that, you can also find the chat option. It looks like a little speech bubble at the bottom, and let us know you'd like to speak, and that will be there as well.
If you are commenting that you submitted a comment electronically, we are going to read those, so you don't need to raise your hand. Maybe we should move to those if there's no other raised hands.
Okay.
Hello. Name.
You're on with the board.
Hi, it's David Baldwin, 504 Malman Avenue. I just wanted to speak on behalf of my kindergartner and my young 3-year-old. We just, in our house, we're not against science and we're not against, taking the law and following it to the letter. But, what we've seen happen throughout these 2 years is that we've put our trust into our government, how it was founded, how it was developed. And those government officials were put in place. And then we had different judicial branches that are there to follow up with, checks and balances. And now we've had a legal action that, whether you say it was overstepping or somebody else says it wasn't, by the governor to have a mask mandate, we've now had a ruling against that by the court. And I feel like until that's appealed and those follow protocols, and we're sending mixed messages to our children about who they should follow, if they should follow dictators that take leadership in their own hands and go against it. I mean, this is what our country was founded on. And so for me, it's a simple legal issue that we need to teach the kids the same message we were taught so that we continue to live in a free world, with the pursuit of liberty and justice. That's it.
Thank you, David. Before we move to the written comment period, do we see any others with their hands raised? Okay. Hi, Darren, you're on with the board.
Hello, my name is Darren Barnes. I live at 12409 Quasi Avenue. This is really difficult and challenging to have to share this about my youngest son, who's a 6th grader, and the people that are talking about data and articles that they're reading. The data that I'm going by is the child that I've lived with for the last 16 months, who has been the most outgoing, happy child up until this pandemic. The data that I see is there was a time where he was crying, and I've shared this with the board, and you guys have been very empathetic, and I appreciate it. But there's been times that he's cried every single night for 45 minutes, rocking back and forth, trying to understand the world, trying to understand why he can't see the faces of his friends. And this isn't coming from his political parents, because his 8th grade son could care less. He's fine with masks. So I'm also just saying this because I hope the people that have children, they're doing fine with masks. I'm happy for you. I really am. but I just hope you can understand and have empathy for the children that have been crying for 45 minutes on end every single night, especially on a Sunday night, knowing they have to go back to a place that they used to love. And he is doing better. He is doing better. It's down to maybe 2 times per week. But I'm just trying to make a point so that people can really understand how children are really being hurt, and every child is different. And he's definitely been impacted by this. And I just want to thank the school for doing everything they possibly could to help our son. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Nate, anybody else? Okay, we have one more person in the room. Please approach and give us your name.
I submitted electronically, but I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, so.
Okay.
Clayton Rule, 220 Hickory Court. The negative effects of children wearing masks to this date has not fully been studied. Why is that? It's because the people who would perform these studies feel that it's inhumane to subject a child to regulated testing of how masks affect their well-being with no idea of the possible damage masking could be causing. Who would want to take that chance? Who would want to volunteer their child for those studies? If you agree, then why are we blindly subjecting our children each day to a real-life study with them wearing masks for the entirety of a school day? Because politicians said it would be a good idea, is that why? Also, it's known that younger children develop basic emotional and language skills through facial expressions. Therefore, are we setting up an entire generation of kids for developmental failure? We won't know the answer to that question for years to come. But we do want to put the development of our, do we want to put the development of our children at risk? Everyone will have their own opinion on this, and this will take the calculated, and they will take the calculated risks that they will feel comfortable with. That is the basis of mask optional situations. Let families make their own choices for their own unique situations and comfort levels. I strongly urge to put the power into the hands of the families. The school district has done an amazing job at navigating these difficult times. My hat is off to each and every one of you. But there are too many unknowns that could have long-term consequences that none of us will be aware of until it's too late. I urge school board to empower the families and make their decisions by moving to mask optional. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton. Nate, how are we on Zoom?
I'll read the chat message. This message is from Lauren Pace, 531 Lansdowne Lane, Lake Bluff. Thank you for your continued patience of the board and the school staff members. I wanted to express my support for the school mitigation's efforts to keep our kids safe. I fully support mandatory masks and keep all kids safe. As a mother of 2 boys, they are not stressed because they understand that masking is about being selfless and protecting others. They respect and understand that 900,000 people in the US have died and will never have the privilege of breathing behind a mask or otherwise. If masking will prevent illness or death, it's a small, if masking will prevent even one serious illness or death, it's a small accommodation. I think our children reflect the attitude of their families. My children are grateful to be in school and around friends that are healthy.
Thank you. And Sandra, we have you
Yes.
on. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sandra Wickner, 307 Green Bay Road. I just want to thank all the teachers at Lake Bluff Elementary and all the support staff. They've been doing an exceptional job during this time. And we were one of the only schools to be open when every other school was closed. I am also a Highland Park teacher at the high school, and I fully support the use of masks in school. I do not want to give the virus to anyone else. I care for our teachers, our staff members, and I know that some families may have people with health issues, and the getting COVID would really negatively affect them. And I have had a parent who has died from COVID. Yes, she had underlying factors, but my mother did pass. And I do not want COVID. I still travel, I still do things outside, I still go out, but I wear my mask. And that's because I want to make it safe for others, because I care for others. And my kids have been doing exceptionally well in school. And I appreciate the mask breaks that they have. And when they do go outside at recess, they take off their masks and they see each other's faces and their smiles. So I would highly recommend that we keep the masks. And I thank the board for all their time and all their efforts. I really do appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Anybody else on the Zoom? Anybody else in the room? Okay, we'll move on to written comment. Bear with us. We do have about 90 written comments. Just like for spoken, we're going to keep, some of these are short, some of these are long. We are going to keep them to 2 minutes maximum. So bear with us as we read through.
Catherine Salbilla, I thank the board and the superintendent for retaining the mask mandate designed to keep our students and faculty safe by taking simple measures to reduce the transmission of COVID. Part of this is to learn that we all have the obligation to take care of each other and consider the community when making decisions. In today's extraordinarily polarized world, falling back on the principles of our founding fathers is more important than ever. I believe our founding fathers would similarly retain the mask mandate. Again, thank you for putting the safety of our children first. Jay?
Judy Friedes Craig, please follow the CDC guidelines and continue to have students and staff mask in order to protect our community.
Ginger Corbett, mandatory masking in schools saves lives. The science is clear. The school system must act in the best interest of all children, and any modification to the current risk mitigation strategy would be a wholesale abortion of that responsibility.
Christian Bryant, community spread of COVID is still incredibly high, and as such, masks should remain mandatory in school until the science and the health department indicate it is safe for them not to be. I don't want my kindergartner to spread COVID to her unvaccinated sister, grandparents, or anyone else.
Meredith Rajan, I'm writing in support of requiring masks on students in our district. There are children present who are too young to vaccinate, and it is unthinkable to ask them to enter a school building during a respiratory virus pandemic without multiple layers of protection. Additionally, teachers deserve to have continued protection in their places of work.
The next is Davud Korzad. I would like to advocate for the removal of mandating children to wear masks in school and move towards a voluntary masking posture. The science of the efficacy of masks in children is mixed at best, with evidence beginning to mount towards its ineffectiveness. The adverse impact to children, however, is clear. Children are adversely impacted by masks. Therefore, I submit that it is important that we take the best interests of the kids into consideration and remove mandates for masking. Just because we were not part of the lawsuit doesn't mean that one cannot be started in our school district. We should avoid having to go that route if at all possible. It will cost the community unnecessary funds. Thank you for listening.
Krista Few, kids, especially young children, are missing out on nonverbal communication, emotion language, and basic human interpretive development, which will have long-term ramifications on their attachment, social, and academic development. Humans depend on these skills. They are essential. Masks are not normal and severely inhibit the basic human requirement for normal growth and development. Regardless of what COVID was, we need to embrace what it has become, an endemic that we need to live with. Our children need adults to fight for them so they can develop normally.
Richard Oakford Jr., it's beyond time for us to rescind the mandatory masking policy like District 67 has. Please help make this happen.
Maggie Klistek, I am urging the board to remove the mask requirements for all students and staff members in our district buildings. Many children across the world have been learning maskless without any spread of illness. Please use this opportunity to bring smiles back to learning. Thank you for serving our district on the board.
Lisa Spano, I'm asking the school districts in Lake Bluff and Lake Forest continue to require masks be worn by students, staff, and visitors until it is safe to stop as determined by State Department of Health. Thank you.
Valerie Steiner, please continue to require the masks in schools. Sometimes the community has to make a collective decision to protect the community. If the Sangamon County's ruling is upheld and interpreted to impact all districts, our district will have the responsibility to make this decision on behalf of our community. The district will be making the decision to protect or not to protect our community. There is no in-between, as much as some may try to argue there is. Masks are effective only if all or most of the community wears masks. It is not as simple as you decide for your family and I decide for my family. Because your decision affects my family and our grocer's family and our barista's family and our teacher's family, the benefits outweigh the costs by a lot. Community-wide mask wearing protects against illness. As a result, it keeps kids, teachers, and staff in school. Keeping kids in school is good for their mental health. Also, not being the reason your friends and family get sick from COVID is good for their mental health as well. Not only do masks protect against physical illness, but they help maintain economic stability. If my child and your child wear masks, it is less likely that COVID will be passed along to individuals who work in service jobs who cannot afford to miss work to care for themselves or family members. I want to help that family, and so should you. So should our children. Let's teach our children that our world is bigger than ourselves, our families, and Lake Bluff. Wearing a mask is not ideal. To some, it is uncomfortable. It might fog up your glasses. You might get a pimple on your nose. You may need a breath mint, but the alternatives are way worse for everyone. And if you decide to make masks optional, you're deciding to make more people sick. You are deciding to keep some kids out of school. You are deciding to undermine the economic stability of families. Please make the right decision, which is the only right decision under these circumstances.
Maya Yanev. Hello all, I am writing in support of the mask mandate. I have two kids, one in Lake Forest High School and one at Lake Bluff Middle School. Both of them are doing fine with having to wear the mask at school and in every other public place. We are still not out of the woods from COVID, and even though we are all tired of having to wear the masks, it is better to wait another few months before we take them off, considering the infectious rate and the death toll that is still going on. Thank you. Maya Yanev.
Amy Rivas, to continue the charade of mask wearing is criminal. The harm that has been caused to children by lockdowns and masks will never be able to be measured. And this madness now for their well-being.
Bianca Catalano. My name is Bianca Catalano, and I am for masks being optional. Masks or no masks should be student parent choice.
Pamela Metz. My name is Pamela Metz, and I have two children at LBES. Masks should be optional and not mandatory.
Allison Graff, I want the choice to wear masks. Thank you.
Sean Jackson. My name is Shauna Jackson, and I want the choice of masks or no masks in Lake Bluff 65.
Nicole Holson. My name is Nicole Holson. I want masks to be optional for my son at LB 65.
Jennifer Scroggins. My name is Jennifer Scroggins, 735 Mommon Avenue, Lake Bluff, and I would like my kids to have the choice to wear or not wear a mask in District 65.
Amy Marsh. My name is Amy Marsh, and I want the choice of mask or no mask in Lake Bluff 65.
Yolanda Florentinas. I want the choice of mask or no mask in LB 65.
Krista Hugel. My name is Krista Hugel. I have two children attending LBES. I want the choice of mask or no mask in District 65.
Laura LaPietra. Austin versus Pritzker determined that the governor's COVID emergency orders are null and void, which puts the responsibility of doing what is right in your hands. It is widely known that cloth masks do not provide any protection, and we know that our children are not at risk for COVID. However, there are risks for long-term physical development and emotional harm from forced masking for hours every day. It is time to do the right thing for our children and make masks optional. To quote the judge, this type of evil is exactly what the law is intended to restrain.
Sylvia. Hi, my name is Sylvia Baldwin. I want the choice of mask or no mask in LB 65.
Mallory Ciarocci. My name is Mallory Ciarocci, and I want our children to have the choice to wear a mask or not to wear masks at LB 65.
Laura Breakstone. To our amazing Lake Bluff board, I would like to first thank the board for their continued excellence, care, and thoughtfulness during these unprecedented times. Regarding the Austin versus Pritzker case and how it may or may not affect our district, I would like to say that you have done a wonderful job navigating safety protocols during COVID. I support whatever decision you come to as a group. To other parents on either side of the aisle, please be respectful and graceful in your words and actions and tone. I understand why some families want masks. I understand why some families do not want masks. I ask that our community be respectful of individual circumstances and feelings about these policies. This is not a time to gloat, scream, or rant. It is a time to come together as a community to support one another, our teachers and our administration, and find a solution with dignity.
Molly Forlow. It's time to make masking a choice that families get to make for themselves, not for others.
Lane Bennett, Lake Bluff District 65 for choice, kindness, and respect in regards to masks. Whatever any student and family chooses, let's support their decision. Again, LB 65 for choice, kindness, and respect.
Amanda Demas. I'm in favor of continuing to follow the mask mandate with reasonable exceptions for those who require one. My kids have said that they aren't bothered by wearing masks and are used to them at this point. They understand that not everyone who wants to can be vaccinated, and they go to school with kids who are either too young to be vaccinated or have siblings who are too young to be vaccinated. They also worry that if masking becomes optional, they won't be able to see their elderly grandparents because their grandparents are in a high-risk category. I clearly agree with them, but thought I would share their opinions since they are the ones who are most affected by your decision. Thank you for your hard work and dedication to our kids and our community.
Amanda Stubblefield. Dear Lake Bluff Board and Administrators, I am writing to you to provide our perspective on the needed discussion related to masking in our schools. First and foremost, we want to express our deepest gratitude and support to the board, the administration, and the educators of LB 65. We have appreciated the evidence-based decisions that have led the way throughout the pandemic. You have focused on ensuring our children continue to receive an education while also prioritizing our children's health and well-being. Emotions are clearly high around the state of Illinois and in our community surrounding the issue of masks in school. As the parents of a medically fragile student, I want to ensure that there is a clear understanding of what removal of the mask mandate will entail to her and potentially other students in similar situations. Without a mask required setting, our daughter will be forced into a homebound instruction period for her own safety, as there is no way to predict what level of risk she would encounter throughout the day. This creates an in-school environment where she cannot be afforded a safe place to be able to participate in her classes and the social aspects that school provides. Instead, she will be isolated with no ability to interact with her peers throughout the day. I would respectfully ask the board for two actions. One, to not create a mask optional environment that creates an unknown environment to children and staff who are at greater risk for infections. Instead, I would ask that the science continue to lead and that the board engage in a dialogue with medical experts and impacted community members to develop a transparent plan based on localized vaccination and infection rates that would safely work towards an environment where mask wearing is not needed. Until then, I would ask that masks continue to be mandatory to equally protect all of our students, staff, and administrators. Two, if the decision is to move to mask optional, please do not take this action without firstly ensuring that there is a solid plan in place for your medically fragile students. This cannot happen overnight, and thusly a reasonable date of action would need to be established rather than an effective immediately approach. Kind regards, Amanda and John Stubblefield.
Angela Russell, I would welcome choice at schools for teachers and students. Neither mask wearing or choosing to unmask should be criticized.
Kelly Scott, I want children to have a choice in mask wearing. My 7-year-old said, I'm not sure my class will recognize me with my whole face. I don't even know when my friends smile. These children and their mental health are struggling. We need choice.
Kevin Fitzgerald. Dear board members, I write as an LBES parent and member of the Lake Bluff community concerned with what has become a divisive issue in these increasingly polarized and polarizing times. I don't envy the position of the board as you've been entrusted by the voters to balance the needs and safety of the students and staff at a time when scientific consensus on most COVID mitigation measures is hard to come by. That said, and with respect for your authority to make the decision, I hope that you move to eliminate the mask mandate now in place for Lake Bluff students. While I was initially in favor of our children wearing masks in schools, among other mitigation measures, the scientific evidence no longer bears it out. As shown in studies animating the governors of New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Oregon, to name a few of the states recently revisiting their positions to curtail their respective mandatory masking policies. Website LinkedIn, a couple websites LinkedIn. COVID student rates are not correlated with mandatory school masking policies, and there's little to no connection between staff COVID rates and student masking. On the other side of the coin, there is cause for concern related to our kids' social and emotional development on account of the long-term masking policy. It's been a strange few years, but it seems as if student life is at least related to our kids, at least one of the places where science shows we can and should get back to something approaching normal. I don't think much of the recent legal decision that's led to where we are now, but it certainly provides this board with an opportunity to reevaluate its position in light of the best available evidence and taking into account the sentiment of the community. Weighing that evidence and in the spirit of representing the views of the Lake Bluff community, the board should abandon its mandatory masking policy. Respectfully, Kevin Fitzgerald.
Gregory Watson, I fully support masks being optional in District 65.
Green Tivnan, please stay the course. The current mitigation efforts are working. In addition, not being named a party in the DeVore lawsuit means it does not directly apply to our students in District 65. This is an opportunity to offer the least disruptive learning environment for our children by being strong enough, brave enough, and consistent enough to not change the current masking mitigation requirement.
Mark Rickmeyer, I know this is a difficult topic, and I hope the entire town is thankful for the school board for taking the time to listen patiently to their requests from the families and parents in town. I cannot imagine this is an easy job for any of you on the school board. We greatly appreciate the efforts you are all going through to find balance in such difficult circumstances. I have been thankful about the mask policies in school and the COVID regulations that have kept kids healthy and in person this year. Until numbers go down and the vaccine is more readily available to the younger siblings, I would encourage that the masking practices to stay. And hopefully soon, as nicer weather comes back and vaccines are more readily available for younger kids, it will be easier and safer to loosen the mask restrictions. I don't think we are there yet and would encourage this group to stay the course.
Margaret Vioni, after all the evidence and data that has been provided since early 2020, I feel as though there is no need for further data gathering and analysis. Please make a decision based on incidence rates, vaccination numbers, and consider natural immunity. Several sources, including Johns Hopkins and Dr. Fauci, have stated that masks do not prevent transmission of COVID. Wearing one is just a visual. If you have attended any school sporting event, you've seen that the kids are indeed wearing masks around their necks. Neither teammates, coaches, or school administrators are enforcing the mask mandate. Let's stop the display. Those that have concerns about their health can protect themselves with all the PPE they would like. Those that are ready to move on should be allowed the option to go without a mask.
Katie Sakara, thank you to all the members of the board, school staff, and teachers for all your dedication to the school and our students. I do not support making masks optional at this point in time. I believe we need to determine a plan for how we will transition from the current setup and what the plan will be in the coming weeks and months. But to make that change right now, while numbers are still high and hospitals are functioning near maximum capacity, would be premature. Switching too quickly without a defined plan could put the health of our teachers and staff at risk and impact our ability to maintain in-person learning. Also, have we considered how this type of decision would impact any students with special medical histories or needs? Is there a plan in place for those students to be considered and accommodated? We must ensure our approach is well thought out and is the best and safest path forward for all students. We are all tired, we're all over it, but please let's do this right and be over and done with it for good.
Alexandra Benz, Lake Bluff has an incredible sense of community, and now is the time to show our children that we can work together. There does need to be an open and respectful discussion of what mitigation measures will look like moving forward as we enter the future of COVID being an endemic infection. Now is the time to start those conversations and listen to community members, teachers, and experts. That said, now is not the time to make any changes to the current masking protocols based solely upon a single lower court decision. That case has not been fully adjudicated and has a high likelihood of being overturned on appeal. Instead of making changes now, we should allow the judicial process to work as intended and make our changes based upon the final outcome. If the mandate is upheld, we will just be reverting back to the current protocols in only a short time. This will cause the children unnecessary confusion, disruption, and frustration. As we discuss what our mitigation measures should look like moving forward, we need to keep in mind that our decisions not only impact the school children, but also their families and siblings. While the vaccine is available to those over 5, there are a large number of families with children under that age who are not yet eligible. Additionally, there are many members of the school and the community with complex medical issues who deserve protection from COVID. The choice to remove the mask mandate needs to be made with the appropriate safeguards in place for those children and their families. Soon the vaccine will be available to all ages, and we should wait to make any changes until those who would like to vaccinate have had the opportunity to make that choice. At that point, when developing a mask optional protocol, consideration should be made for case count, student vaccine status, and health department guidance. We all agree that we wish our children didn't have to wear masks, but this has been proven to reduce transmissions and keep people safe.
Masks don't just protect the person wearing them, they protect others from that person as well.
Elizabeth Knight, thank you to the teachers, administrators, staff, and school board members for doing an excellent job during these past 2 difficult and confusing years. I know we all want this to end and get our kids out of masks, and I believe we can do this together in a respectful manner without having to put our kids on the front line. I think the time is sooner rather than later, but the time is not right now. We need to continue to work on a layered approach with multiple mitigation maneuvers, including increasing our vaccination rates, waiting for lower test positivity rates, community transmission, increased ways to ventilate. Also, we all saw what happened after winter break, so perhaps waiting until after spring break would behoove us by giving us a chance to weather the likely mini surge that will occur as people travel and congregate. I will say that I am also disheartened that some have told their kids incorrect information that LBES is not requiring masks, which has caused confusion amongst our children. In the end, I do know we are all on the same page and that we care about our kids. So hopefully we can work together to come up with a solution.
Matt Allison, every person everywhere is tired of COVID and tired of wearing masks. Thankfully, the experts believe we are within a few short weeks of being done with this pandemic. As we move to the endemic phase, like the majority of Lake Bluff residents, I hope the school board uses its authority to continue masking in the schools, at least in my opinion, until the end of February, or until the state of Illinois ends its mask recommendations, whichever comes first. We do not want to experience the chaos and bullying that occurred in Lake Forest yesterday and today due to the mismanagement of the schools there. Thank you.
Megan Lehman, on behalf of my family, I would like to ask that LBES continue to require masks at this time. We are all very hopeful that the downward trend we're seeing with the COVID-19 numbers is one that we will be able to maintain, which will certainly lead to a mask-free environment in the future. However, we are still in the middle of cold and flu season, and in just over a month, many families will be heading off for spring break travel. It only seems logical to, at the very least, keep the mask requirement until we have gotten through the break and are able to see that the cases don't spike at that time. This also gives us more time to see that the numbers are still trending downward and hopefully vaccination rates upward. A more appropriate time to reevaluate masking would be in early April, assuring that we don't have a post-travel spike. Thank you for your time, attention, and consideration.
Stacy Sanderson, my family has been compliant and has adhered to the rules regarding masking in our schools. It is now time that I stand up and say when harm is being committed. I implore you to review the evidence and peer-reviewed studies regarding masking children. Please move our district to a mask optional policy, as many other communities have done, not only in Illinois, but throughout the United States. Show our kids the strength it takes to change your path when provided with evidence contrary to your original thought, the strength it takes to change course. It is our kids who will benefit from seeing those in leadership positions demonstrating this. We now know that masks are not healthy for our children. The truth is also this: there is no law that requires our children to wear masks in schools. There is only guidance from the CDC. I know you probably feel bombarded with all the requests, but I hope you understand we are literally fighting for the mental and physical health of our children. Please put them first. That is the duty your jobs require. All of us owe them this. Thank you.
Liz Mayer, good morning. First and foremost, thank you so much for your service to our community during this tumultuous and difficult time. I'm writing today to share my support for keeping masks required in our schools. First, I believe consistency is important to our children. They have gone through so many changes, adjustments, pivots, and pirouettes during the last 18 months that there is no reason to further change the rules when the data does not currently support it. The CDC is still recommending masking, particularly when indoors with many people from different households. Additionally, we have not reached a critical mass for vaccination rates to even be considering unmasking, especially when a portion of our population still cannot get vaccinated. While of those who have responded for LBES, 82.2% are vaccinated, which is great. That only represents 51.7% of the school. That's not good enough. Further, our teachers deserve a safe environment to work in. Many seem to forget that they are exhausted humans with families and lives to go home to at the end of the day. They deserve to feel comfortable and confident at work. I firmly believe we should have metrics for unmasking. Community rates, vaccination rates, et cetera, should all contribute to this decision. It should be a data and health-driven drive, not community outrage-driven. We should be teaching our children kindness, compassion, and empathy during difficult times, not that throwing a fit gets you what you want at the detriment of others. While I know many parents are upset by all this, my question is, how are the kids? My child does not even seem fazed by the mask. Most days she gets in the car and makes it home before she even realizes she needs to take it off. Anecdotally, most of the children I interact with feel this way. I encourage you to let this lawsuit play out without making rash decisions or making decisions that may need to be rescinded later. Further, I encourage creating a plan that allows for a metric/science-based off-ramp from masks. The kids are so happy to be in school and participating in extracurriculars. I would hate having to revert from that. Thank you so much, Liz Mayer, parent of Addison Rathbone, grade 3.
Holly Price, mask optional is long overdue. However, respect for individual choice, teachers, student, and staff is a must. Let's respect both sides by letting our community make the choice that's right for their families.
Rush Holson. On Monday morning, I woke up to a barrage of texts and social media posts filled with jubilant children in Lake Forest who were so excited to be in school mask-free. The sheer joy on their faces was inspiring. Here in Lake Bluff, we must do all we can to ensure not one more day is stolen from our kids' childhood. Yes, stolen may sound inflammatory to an extent, but it also happens to be perfectly appropriate. At no point did any of us ever go years without seeing our friends or teachers' faces in the classroom. At no point did any of us ever have to distance or be sent home for 10 days if we were in close contact with someone who tested positive for a virus. I could go on and on here, but the point is obvious. We need to stop with the euphemisms and call this what it is, the theft of our kids' formative years. So why are we doing it? There must be a good reason to force our children to pay this exorbitant cost. One reason I hear over and over again is to stop community spread. You will excuse anyone who fails to take this seriously as the adults in our community gallivant around town to restaurants, bars, sporting events, and concerts. Only a society modeled after Gomorrah prioritizes the social wants of adults over the needs of children. Another reason often mentioned is masks mitigate the spread of the virus. In a just world, the burden of proof for this assertion would be on the entity implementing draconian safety measures on our children. But alas, here we are. There has not been one controlled study to suggest that masks in schools mitigate the spread of the virus, not one. We only ever hear what experts say, absent any scientific rigor being applied to their baseless claims. I would encourage everyone to read Unmasked by Ian Miller. He is a data scientist who goes to painstaking lengths to objectively prove beyond any reasonable doubt that school masking doesn't have any real impact on virus spread. A more cursory example would be the most comprehensive study done in the matter in England, which states we do not find any correlations with mask mandates as it relates to the efficacy of forced masking. Insert link. Furthermore, just look around, look at the graph of COVID spread. Unmasked school districts simply do not see an uptick in cases, period, full stop. Any intellectually honest person who scrutinizes the data we are told to follow can see the benefits of masking lie between extremely minimal and non-existent. This is a very long comment.
Let's
I'm
go
going to stop
10 more
at 10
seconds. Yeah.
So what exactly is the cost of this virtually empty benefit? The costs are enormous since masking in schools has become commonplace. We have seen a 300% uptick in speech delay for the youngest among us.
I think that's good. Just for the record, all of these, the board had a chance to look at in advance. We're not going to let anybody go over 2 minutes and 15 seconds. These will all be part of the public packet, so everybody can read these in full. So we'll continue to the next one.
Christine Warner, I believe that kids wearing masks should be a personal decision made by each student based on their own personal circumstances. I believe that our children are being taught to hide and essentially mask their emotions, their physical appearance, and their individual personalities by mask wearing. And I think it is unhealthy for them emotionally, causing permanent damage to their mental health evolution. Thank you for your consideration.
Dave Vrioni, my family is in very strong support of D65 moving to a mask optional policy immediately. Illinois is one of very few states still requiring masks in schools and the only state anywhere near the Midwest. There has been absolutely no measurable beneficial impact of the mask mandates in Illinois schools and no clear criteria for removing the mandate as has been provided by the state. Our children have been subjected to fear, tyranny, false science, and the whims of power-hungry politicians, and it is time to end this ridiculous period in their lives. Many of us have politely and patiently complied with this foolishness far too long. For those desiring to wear masks, we respect their right of personal choice and pledge to conduct ourselves accordingly. Our LBMS child will be encouraged to exercise his free will regarding masks in school. Any attempts to persuade him or require him to wear a mask or any attempts to prevent him from entering school will be considered a violation of his civil liberties. A formal notification to that effect has been sent to LBMS administration. We look forward to the prompt removal of mask mandates at D65.
Corey McKendry, thank you for serving on the board. Please give families the opportunity to choose what is right for their child. Masks should be required in nursing homes and hospitals to protect the sick and elderly. Masks should not be required in schools with the majority of children being healthy and low risk. Let's bring back the smiles on our kids' faces and our teachers too. The time is now to accept new challenges, move forward, and create the best learning environment for our children. Thank you, Corey McKendry.
Kelly and Ian Johnson, we are writing in support of requiring masks on our students and staff in our district. It is unreasonable to not wait a few short months until the vaccine is available for children as young as 6 months old, especially considering the fact that the elementary school houses pre-K students who aren't even eligible for the vaccine yet. Additionally, teachers should be protected, as some of our teachers see hundreds of students a week, greatly increasing their exposure. Thank you for your consideration.
Anne Marie McNiven. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the school board for always having our community's best interests as their top priority and will continue to support whatever decisions they make regarding how to navigate this COVID era. Understandably, it may seem the community is divided on what the best path forward is. However, I think we are more aligned than we think. We all want a safe, productive learning environment for our children, staff, and families. And yes, we all look forward to the day when masks are no longer required. Everyone's situation is unique, and we all can provide different pleas of how masking is either helping or hurting their circumstances. As someone who wears glasses and has a child with a speech and language delay, I get it. As a mother who has family members or friends with children with compromised immunity, I get it. Personally, I would welcome a situation, as you have done it in the past, that takes into account current health department guidance, community transmission rates, masks when high and no masks when low, and worst case, if needed, potentially would allow for classrooms based on risk, vaccinated and masked, vaccinated and unmasked, etc. But that would be a lot to ask the school and staff to arrange for the third semester. Realistically, we are likely just weeks away from mask mandates being lifted. Ideally, we continue to be patient, understanding, and work towards this eventuality so the school and families can plan accordingly. Many thanks for allowing us all to provide input.
Melissa Pasquazi, I would like mask wearing to continue for all students and staff in the schools of Lake Bluff. As a family who has members who are in a high-risk category, contracting COVID and passing it on to one of those family members would most likely be deadly. We have all worked so hard to get through this pandemic, and I too am tired of wearing a mask and the limitations that have been in place. It makes no sense to backtrack at this point when we are so close to being in a safe place. Wearing a mask is a small thing that we can do to protect each other.
Darren Few, thank you for this opportunity to comment. When the COVID crisis first began, I, like all of us, was extremely concerned with its threat to the safety of the nation, our community, and my family. I believe it's real, and I believe it can be very dangerous to some. While I choose not to wear a mask whenever possible, I also believe in the rights of private entities to require one while I'm on their property if they so choose. I also believe that I have the right to choose which businesses I patronize. In most cases, I'll wear a mask when requested out of common courtesy. I tell you this so you understand I'm not necessarily one of those "you'll never muzzle me, COVID is a hoax" anti-mask people. I am, however, anti-mask mandate by government. We've been in the COVID crisis for 2 years. We've been masked for 2 years, and people are still getting COVID. It's time to get rid of the mandates. Let's be honest, COVID is not a lethal threat to the vast majority of people, never has been. It's especially not a threat to kids. Our leaders don't truly believe COVID to be as big a threat as they would have us to believe. This has been evidenced time and again by photos of them gathering, standing close together, dining and partying in large numbers, and doing so without masks, or worse yet, embarrassing videos catching them donning masks only for appearance's sake, right before they enter the public eye. I say this not as a political statement, but rather to demonstrate that the people advocating for these mandates for you, me, and our kids do not abide by the rules they set, nor do they actually believe the threat is all that serious. If they truly believe COVID was as dangerous as they tell us it is, they would never take their masks off. They would not gather in large groups in close proximity with others, and they would not travel for vacation to states without mask mandates. Instead, they would cloister themselves in their homes, minimizing contact with others. They are not really afraid, but they tell us we should be. Our kids have gone long enough covering their faces, muffling their voices, and obscuring their emotions. We know the vast majority of communication is actually done non-verbally. How much information is being lost due to masking? How much learning and understanding is being hindered? How much social development and nuance of relationships is not being experienced and internalized by our young children in their formative years? How much fear is being pushed on our kids that they might catch a terrible disease and die if they don't wear a mask? Stop there.
That's fine. I want to interject here just for those of you watching at home, just give you an update. We are 2/3 of the way through. So thanks for bearing with us. We're within our time limit we've allotted to this. So we'll keep going and read the last third.
Shannon Tulis and Robert Klecker. The most important consideration to our family is to keep our kids in person. If we switch to mask optional, do the number of quarantines increase due to close contact in the classroom? Any other changes to procedures that would mean remote school is more likely for some or all kids? If so, we think that should be a very important consideration for the administration and the board to take into account when making any changes to the current mask requirement. In addition, we would like to hear what the administration and the teachers believe is in the best interests of our children while in the school building, as we feel you are in the best position to make that determination. Thank you.
Eric and Jessica Blum, thank you as always for taking time to meet to discuss these ongoing issues in this important recent update. We just wanted to make a request that despite recent legal events that have occurred, that the board continues to appreciate and define its school health and safety policies based on recommendations from actual medical authorities and guidelines as opposed to litigatory outcomes. We are also concerned about an optional masking recommendation and the possible ramifications this could have in the form of social pressure and division that might occur in the classroom. We hope that the board can make a uniform determination in favor or against. Thank you for your continued scrutiny and involvement with our children and school safety.
Emily and Colin McBean, many thanks to Dr. Lealy and the board members for their leadership. As we begin to look at phasing out masking, I ask that the Lake Bluff schools do so in a measured and mindful way that is based on science and policy. This is not an issue of winners versus losers. This is about making smart decisions that respect previous policies and adapt based on data. When expectations change on a dime and previous policies are callously disregarded, it sets the stage for a defiant and self-righteous disregard for school policy and authority. Our students and teachers deserve better, which includes a measured approach that allows for everyone to choose to unmask when it has been deemed safe to do so by local administration and health officials.
Jennifer Manning. Hi, this is Jennifer Manning, and I would like to express my support of going mask optional in D65. Thank you.
Nicole Aldridge, our family supports the current protocols that are in place. We support continuing to wear masks in school.
Jessica Czar, thank you, board, staff, administrators. You are in difficult territory and I appreciate your efforts for our kiddos. You've shared that based on parent self-report, less than 41% of LBES has confirmed vaccination, leaving over half of our kids susceptible to spreading COVID. We all want our children in school, and your success has demonstrated that the best way to keep them there is to follow the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation of universal masking in schools. Responsible adults have an obligation to safeguard the health of our children, and the same teaching them and masking has proven over and over again largely effective in mitigating the spread of COVID in schools. Please continue our mitigation efforts and keep the safety of our children and staff your top priority. Please don't let litigious voices in the minority win over the voices of our exhausted public health experts. And for those asking if there is an end in sight, speak with epidemiologists. Make a data-supported plan that includes transparent sharing of progress, percent of children vaccinated, percent opting into testing, community rates, et cetera, and show our community what needs to be done to remove mask requirements through basic acts of humanity while keeping our most vulnerable safe.
Nikki Walsh, it's time to smile. Lake Bluff is a special town. We stick together, we stand up for each other, we support each other. We are small and mighty. We have battled the COVID war for 2 long years, and we are on the brink of many small victories. Please allow our children the same choices afforded to other children in most states throughout the US and in neighboring districts like our sister district of Lake Forest. Let our children greet their teachers with a smile for the first time since March 2020. Let the teachers smile back and make the students finally feel comfortable and at ease. Allow choice. Not everyone will choose the same path, but our children, teachers, and families will all support each other because that's what we do in Lake Bluff. Thank you for all of the time on this over the past few days and the last 2 years. Let's finish this chapter with a happy ending.
Alyssa Carlson, I want mask optional for the children in Lake Bluff.
Christina Bjork, please allow for choice in masking at LBES. We are at a point in this pandemic as a world and community where I believe universal masking at schools is proving to do more harm than good, especially in regards to our children's emotional development and health.
Adrienne Merle, first, I want to say thank you. Your efforts during what has been and continues to be a challenging time are truly appreciated. As a parent, my experience is that you have maintained open, two-way communication with us while keeping staff and students safe and in school. And for this, I have immense gratitude. Second, I'm sharing an idea that I do not hear in the dialogue about masks. Masks do not have to be all or nothing. A phased approach is an option too. As COVID rates fall, could the mask come off when it provides maximum benefit to academics and health? For example, during language classes or in wellness, the school already uses a tiered method with masks off for recess and other breaks. Over time, more mask-free opportunities could be added as long as numbers do not increase. What no one wants is an uptick in cases resulting in school closings due to absences, not to mention risk missing the spring break our staff, students, and families all need. I am most concerned about how this affects elementary staff and students, as that is where my children attend school. Every student there can recite the LBES Pause program, practice kindness, act responsibly, welcome challenges, show respect. I trust you, our seasoned administrators and elected board members, to incorporate that in your decision-making on this and all policy. It is my wish that all district constituents, including parents, keep pause at the forefront, and most of all, that our teachers and students may remain in school for the duration of this year. Thank you for your time. Adrienne Merle.
Paul Kostolansky. We've been conservative throughout the pandemic and followed all guidelines required of us, but it's time to acknowledge that the guidelines are no longer supported by the risk involved. The science has told us for quite some time now that the risk of to adults who are unvaccinated and boosted and to children are infinitesimally low, to the point where COVID is no more harmful than the flu. Yet we continue to force our children to bear the brunt of the pandemic by wearing masks for 8 hours a day. The continuation of the mask requirement is simply not a rational response to where we are at this point in the pandemic when you consider the data. My wife and I support those who want to continue to wear masks, but we also support the right of parents to choose that their children not wear masks. We also fear that by the time the issue plays out in court, we will have spent another full year in masks. We believe the time is now and that it is incumbent upon the district to make a logical decision to either eliminate the mask mandate or allow families to choose. Thank you, Paul.
Jeannie Weidberg. I am a concerned grandmother of 2 elementary school children. My husband was a physician for over 3 decades. He has key insights into the deleterious effects of the masking of children. There is no doubt that the permanent masking of children is not only harmful but unnecessary, considered the data and inconsistent with outcomes over the last 2 years. The well-being of healthy children should be considered in making this crucial decision. Not allowing children the freedom to communicate freely, the ability to learn key facial expressions, and the ability to hear and see the appropriate pronunciation of words is extremely detrimental to the social development and well-being of young children. Children and young adults deserve to live their childhood freely and joyfully, as many adults have been able when growing up. Parents have the right to decide what is best for their children. I strongly support masking as optional. Parents have the right to assess their own children's risk and what they think is best.
Lori Sandler, while everyone wants to have the right to choose, I believe that it is important to remember that any decision we make as adults impacts an entire school community of children and teachers. We cannot just pull the rug out from under them overnight. There was much care and consideration put into reopening schools with layers of mitigation, and there must be care and consideration put into peeling back layers of mitigation. What has been keeping our community safe from a public health crisis has masked the face of education for nearly 2 years. And while the health and social emotional well-being of all has been at the forefront of our decisions, we must continue to keep those priorities at the forefront of our decision-making. We must allow the district leaders and Board of Education time to develop a thoughtful and responsible plan for moving forward. Before the mask mandate went into effect, there was a plan for sectioning mask required or mask optional in order to accommodate every family's needs and comfort level. I have complete faith in our district leaders to make decisions that will take into account the needs and interests of everyone to the greatest extent possible. We must allow them ample time to plan for execution of the next phase thoughtfully and responsibly as they have done thus far. Thank you.
Mark and Nicole Stolzenberg. We are the parents of a medically fragile toddler with 2 older children attending LBES. Our toddler, who is too young to be vaccinated, has had 2 surgeries in the past year and continues to have medical needs that could be complicated by contracting COVID. We strongly believe that masks should be mandatory to reduce the risk of COVID spread at school and better protect our most vulnerable students and/or their family members until children under 5 can be vaccinated and more therapeutics are available.
Howard Bennett. As a physician for more than 30 years, I relied on the scientific community to design, complete, and interpret studies in an unbiased fashion regardless of the results. These studies establish standards of care for medical practice and affect the health and safety of millions of people around the world. At the onset of the COVID pandemic, I was encouraged by claims that our political medical leaders would follow the science to combat the virus. However, it quickly became apparent that our leaders would follow only the particular scientific claims that fit their political narrative. Fortunately for our children, mandatory masks for children in school has become the political football of today. A review of the science, however, is surprisingly clear. The vast majority of research on the effects of masking of school children conclude that masking negatively affects learning and causes significant social and emotional harm. If masks that our children commonly wear dramatically reduce the transmission of COVID in school, perhaps the harm could be justified. However, the most common masks worn by school children are cloth or single layer paper. These masks have repeatedly been shown to offer little to no protection against COVID, both for the wearer and those around them. They become a fashion accessory instead of a medical device. Only K95 masks specifically designed for children have been shown to reduce the wearer's incidence of positive tests by more than 80%. A logical, scientifically based solution is as follows. Allow parents to decide whether their child should or should not wear a mask at school. If parents wish their child to wear a mask at school for any reason, parents or the district should provide K95 masks that have been shown to be effective. Of course, parents must continue to keep symptomatic children at home and rely on testing and quarantine protocols before allowing children to return. Finally, I'd like to thank you for all the time and effort you've put forth these past 2 years for putting the interests of our children above all else. Respectively, Howard Bennett, MD.
John McHenry, original email sent to board but did not work, so please forward. To LB65 board, please keep our community together by aligning our LBES mask mitigation strategy to be the same as Lake Forest schools. Optional at discretion of parents and students. Our child has experienced health-related issues because of the current mask wearing requirements. If you decide not to keep our community together and keep your current mask requirements, then what are the options for parents or students who have health issues because of your decision? If you decide to align with Lake Forest schools, then please also make sure any parents who have children that are medically compromised have the appropriate accommodations to make sure their needs are met as well. Please publicly communicate any and all options for parents and students who are experiencing health problems because of your mask policy. Thank you, John McHenry.
Jillian Jarvinen. I'd like to voice my support for the judge's ruling and ask that the Lake Bluff School District revert its policy to mask optional. I'm sure there will be many comments submitted to you over the next days, stating their views in both directions. I'm also certain that many parents will also voice how masks have little impact, if not any, on the prevention of transmission of viruses. Similarly, many will voice their fear of the virus and ask that our children remain in masks until the virus has been eliminated, which many can agree will be never. It is of concern to me that these children have been in masks for far too long. 2 weeks to flatten the curve has turned into 2 years and counting. We must seriously consider the long-term health effects of masking our children. How many children have suffered repeated headaches, suffered disease from inhaling bacteria and other contaminants that are stuck on their masks and breathe in all day long? How many have suffered psychological issues like anxiety, change in social behaviors, and depression? How many have suffered serious developmental delays in language because they cannot see and model their teacher's mouth and facial expressions? These are just a few examples of how long-term mask use can cause harm for our children. Trusted CNN medical pundit Leanna Wen is in favor of mask wearing being shifted from the government and back to the parents, citing that the science has changed. Masks can still offer some level of protection for those who are wearing it, and that we should no longer be looking at positive case counts to determine policy. See video attached. It's time to allow families to make health decisions for their children.
Kirsten Starr, I would like to thank the board, the teachers, and the administrators for all their hard work navigating this pandemic. I've been impressed with how the school has worked to listen to input from parents and tried to be flexible, all while prioritizing providing as close to a normal learning environment that is both engaging and considerate of the students' physical and emotional health. I respect that there are different opinions on wearing masks, and parents are just trying to do what is right for their children. However, I strongly feel that we need to respect the process and be an example for our children on how we treat others. I look forward to having my child not wear a mask when it is deemed safe to do so. But in the meantime, I trust that the school and the board have our students' best interest in mind, and I hope that as a community, we can respectfully adhere to the guidance they agree on.
Esmeralda to District 65. We understand the recent ruling Austin v. Pritzker is controversial. However, we would like to express our public comment for tomorrow's board meeting. We are residents of Knollwood and have children in both Lake Bluff and Lake Forest school districts. Our family has the strong belief that each family and individual in a family has the right to decide to wear or not wear a mask while in school. Furthermore, it is hard for my LBMS student to understand why Lake Forest School District 67 and 115 will fully comply with the court's ruling and Lake Bluff School District has not complied with this court's ruling.
Marcia Bennett, as a grandparent of 3 District 65 students, I would like to urge the school board to continue their masking policy until the CDC recommends that masks are no longer needed.
Molly Harper, we would like face masks to be optional for LB 65. Thank you.
Nancy Drown, I would like face masks to be optional at Lake Bluff Middle School.
Marcy Kowalski, I would like to request mask optional for Lake Bluff School District 65. We would like the choice, please. This would be best for our children. Thanks.
John Corsten. Per the email sent on Sunday, our goal has always been to ensure continuity of learning and that we offer the best possible learning environment for all of our students every day. This will continue to be our philosophy. Response, it's time for Dr. Leali and the board to offer options for the entire community. Yes, we are divided as a community, but you only seem to be focused on one side. You work for us, the community, and it's time to step up and fight for what's right. It's time to stop hurting our kids' social, emotional, and educational well-being. It's time to offer the best possible learning environment for our kids and live up to your word. It should be each individual family's decision whether to wear a mask. Please make masks optionals. Please make masks optional. Our kids will thank you.
Sarah Parnello, I believe that optional unmasking at this time is premature and not in the best interest of public health in our community.
Kristen Marcasello, I would like to have the choice of whether my children wear a mask to school. I would like to thank LB 65 for all they have done thus far, but please let masking be a choice going forward.
Ashley Smith, masking should be a choice, not a mandate. Thank you.
Kara Weber, I would like to encourage the board to continue with the current mask requirement until children under the age of 5 are able to be vaccinated and transmission rates of this current surge have decreased. Thank you for your time.
Amy Shoemaker. My name is Amy Shoemaker and I want LB 65 to have a choice when it comes to masks. As a mom and a teacher, I understand the complexity of this issue. I know districts have been working over time to try to keep a safe environment for all parties and we are forever grateful. 37 states have no mask mandates, 13 left, and 4 just announced they are ending it. We now must think about the children. Their emotional, social, and academic impacts are alarming, and they need to be prioritized. Isolation, anxiety, anger, withdrawal, speech delays, reading deficits, the list goes on. Kids need to be kids. They need to see smiles on peers and teachers. As the saying goes, a smile is worth 1,000 words. How many have they missed? They need to focus on building skills in a peaceful classroom, not distractions with mask placements and protocols. Children caught in a state of fear show changes in their brain development. Read up on neuroscience and children's development, and you'll see why we need to get back to normal as soon as possible. The younger children have never experienced a class full of smiles and missing teeth. We must refocus our energy on moving past COVID to school, where kids see each other and smile back. That is contagious. It's not just the kids that need this either. Teaching in a mask is like teaching with my hands tied. I want them to see my facial expressions, all emotions without my voice. Parents, let's model how to respect each other's differences and tell our children to do the same. Wear one or not, whatever's best for you. Let's get through this last chapter with compassion and grace for one another's differences. Freedom of choice on masks is our next step toward a better Illinois. Thank you.
Anne Marie McNiven. I would like to thank.
We're good, Jay. We're good. We did it. So thanks to all of you in the room and on the Zoom for sticking with us. Thanks to Dr. Leali. Okay. Yeah, thanks to Dr. Leali and to Tracy and to Jay for reading. And we'll take one more on Zoom. There is another public comment period after that. So I'd like to suggest that we save any additional ones after this one for the second comment period.
Eric, you're under the board.
Yeah, thank you for the time and the consideration for all perspectives. I would just like to share that, from our household, a student in the elementary and the middle school, masks are effective in reducing the transmission of colds and viruses. The fact is 900,000 deaths in the US have occurred from COVID, and the virus mutates through replication. So really our call to action is to do everything that we can to reduce the replication. The tools that we have available are masks, vaccines, and social distancing. So, excuse me, our 2 kids have, stated that they don't enjoy wearing a mask. but they understand this for the greater good. Just like our grandparents were called to take similar actions in World War II. So I feel like the proposal to remove masks is really equivalent to like a non-pink section at a pool. If one kid is not wearing a mask, it's going to affect the kids who are wearing a mask. And really, I think that we just need to continue to follow the recommendations of the healthcare professionals.
All right, thank you, Eric. Okay, so we will now move on. Again, I want to remind, we will have a public comment period at the end of the meeting. I want to move on to item number 5, which is the.
Sorry, if I could read one more comment that was left in the chat that I
Okay,
probably
sure.
read aloud.
Go
I appreciate
ahead.
that.
Yep.
Ashley Niles asking for masks to be optional at LBES, please and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we did it. Okay, item number 5, addition of a discussion item. At each board meeting, we offer the opportunity for board members to suggest the discussion item for future agendas. Does anyone have anything to suggest for future agenda tonight? Okay, not hearing anything, we will move on to the discussion presentations period of our evening. And I'll move into turning over to Dr. Lealy, who's going to do a presentation on COVID-19 update.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for presenting their public comment. Over the last 2 years, I've unfortunately or fortunately had the opportunity to meet many of the people that commented tonight, either talk to them or share emails. And I can say that there hasn't been a moment over the last 2 years that all of those concerns haven't been top of mind. Every single concern that both sides have talked about has been an issue that we've thought about very carefully and tried to make plans to address. And so I appreciate, again, everyone sharing their thoughts. Clearly, there are lots of varying opinions. We know this, so I will get on to the update for tonight. I always start with our mission and vision. It is important for us to stick to this regardless of what we are trying to accomplish. And we are obviously trying to continue to implement an instructional plan that holds true to both of these statements. We have also had decision-making guiding principles since the beginning of this. And this is exactly what I presented on July 21st of 2020 in our first return to school plan. So what is being presented tonight? We are presenting a two-part recommendation for safely updating our mitigations for COVID and returning to more pre-pandemic practices. One, that the board exercise local control and begin strongly encouraging masking as opposed to requiring them, and utilizing test to stay for any identified close contacts as opposed to quarantine. And 2, that the remote option for students out sick be modified to include only asynchronous work. We will be asking for your direction on whether and when to move forward with this recommendation at the end of my presentation. I just wanted to get that out there in front before I provide the background. Here's some data that we've been collecting. Our community choice survey, you can see about 42% of parents feel that staff and students should have a choice to be masked while in school and on the bus. 33.8% or 34% that students and staff should continue to be universally masked, and about 24% that District 65 adjust masking requirements based on local data and current guidance. We have also some staff data here. At this time, about 67% of our staff members feel that students and staff should continue to be universally masked, and about 33% should have the choice to be masked while in school. We have been looking since the beginning of this at community transmission, and not every district has looked at metrics in the same way, but since the beginning and planning for our own situation here, we have looked at zip code data, and this is from the Lake County Health Department. And this is as of today. We are at about 41 cases per 100,000. In the beginning of the pandemic, that would have been unthinkable for us to be in school at that level. In fact, if you recall, 14 per 100,000 was our threshold. And we obviously have been much, much higher than that through the last 2 years. But we are down back around 40, which is equivalent to about where we were at prior to student vaccines. And so when we were universally masked, but had no student vaccines, we were about at that level in school. And now we have a percentage of our students who have been vaccinated and who also we know have been infected at this point and recovered. And so there's a different level of immunity at this point with the same, sort of the same level of community transmission. Our vaccination rates, we have about 43% of students in both buildings. Surprisingly, it's the same percentage fully vaccinated, and about 95% of our staff that have been fully vaccinated. And at this point, fully vaccinated means all recommended vaccinations. So if a booster is recommended for the age group, then you are not up to date on your vaccines unless you've had a booster. And so we have continued use that in our calculations for staff. In terms of prior infection, these are the cases that have been reported to us. We did not ask parents to report to us again, but based on the nursing data, and I can tell you the spreadsheets are lots of pages long, documenting all the medical issues we've dealt with for the last 2 years. Approximately 16% of the students at elementary and 22% of the students at middle school that we know of have had a positive case of COVID. It's hard to put that plus the vaccine together into a combined percentage because we haven't tracked whether or not those students were also vaccinated. We know sometimes that happens. So generally speaking, I would also say it's probably a higher number because I am doubtful that all cases were reported to us. I do want to address one question that I've gotten consistently as we've been thinking about moving towards a more mask recommended approach. And that is obviously our students with significant learning needs and physical needs or medical needs. We do have children like that in our school district and community. And I do want to be very explicit in saying this is a major concern for us. So we have begun contacting families as we knew that this recommendation would be forthcoming personally. With a letter regarding what mitigations and asking what mitigations they feel their child might need above and beyond what they're provided now if they were to start attending school in a mask optional or mask recommended situation. Our case managers are working with those families to determine how best we can support them. And within my recommendation, I am suggesting that as a district, we support any student with requests for additional PPE, whatever those are, to the best that we can. Remote learning. We've all been grateful for remote learning and we've all hated it as parents and teachers. But it's been a key component to our ability to keep students safely learning throughout this pandemic. But it is not sustainable for us to continue to create hybrid classroom environments when students are out of school. And I don't just mean for sickness. We've been very accommodating, sometimes with vacations or other reasons that kids have been out, and it is not a situation that our teachers can manage. So we are recommending a return to pre-pandemic illness procedures. And when a child must be out sick, they're not feeling well, or they have tested positive and they don't have many symptoms, but are still out because they're sick. We would like them to be given work to do at home. We are happy to provide that online over Google Classroom or whatever that online learning platform is. But that we discontinue the synchronous learning opportunity within the classroom because it's been very difficult for our teachers and students actually to manage, and we would catch the children up with anything they miss when they come back to school. Extracurriculars are a privilege, and we will continue to monitor guidance from the IESA because we want to make sure that if we do have student athletes competing, that they're able to continue to compete at the levels that they want to. And so we will be following that guidance. Clubs and other activities would follow the recommended masking policy. We would continue to ask parents to keep students with symptoms home until they resolve for 24 hours. And we mean significant symptoms, fever, vomiting, other gastrointestinal issues until they resolve for 24 hours. Students with symptoms will continue to be sent home and asked to test before they return to school, as long as their symptoms are gone. We cannot stop masking on busing. That's a federal law, and so that will be required on transportation for the near future. Our nursing offices. We will be asking students to wear a mask when they need to come to the nurse's office. The reality is a lot of our students that come to the nurse's office are not sick. They need to take medications, they're injured, they have a math headache or some other issue. So we need to make sure the nurse's office stays as germ-free as possible. So we would ask that students put a mask on before they go in. If they do not want to wear a mask, the nurses will come out of the office and meet them somewhere else in the building. We will continue to offer weekly COVID testing through Shield to those families who would like it. And we ask that all isolation or quarantines that are issued specifically by the Lake County Health Department. So this would be in a situation where there's a case of COVID at home, and that case is reported to the health department, that anyone in close contact that's unable to isolate from that individual in the home, they would be identified as a close contact, perhaps asked to quarantine, that those quarantines and isolation be respected and upheld by students or by staff and students. So I want to be clear. Our administrative team has been looking at ways that we can move towards this for quite some time. This recommendation that we're at today is not specifically because of Austin versus Pritzker, because we are not named defendants in that case. However, the case law being settled that way does offer us an opportunity and a little bit more of backing if we were to go to a masking optional policy from a legal standpoint. But because we're not identified, there are no legal implications for us directly. There are footnotes that are listed in the order, which are unusual and typically don't show up in an order like that. And almost every legal firm in Illinois is trying to figure out how those are applicable. But I can tell you that the case has already been appealed, and the appeal should take approximately a week and a half to be settled. That will be applicable statewide. Whatever that ruling is will be applicable statewide, even though Judge Grishow's order is not. And we anticipate that we will have that ruling late next week. I'm not recommending that we do this because of the case. We're not defendants, we don't need to. I'm recommending it because I think it's a time for us to do this. I believe, like I said, I'm concerned about all the issues that people bring to the table: physical, social and emotional, anxiety, and academic. But there is a risk assessment that the board needs to do when thinking about whether or not you would like to give support to the administrative recommendation. There is a chance that if we go mask recommended, that it could lead to an increase in COVID transmission at school, which we have not had. Although cases in our zip code have decreased 68% in the last 14 days compared to the previous 14 days. So that's also on the Lake County Data Hub and accessible to anybody who wants to see it. It becomes troublesome if we do see an increase in COVID transmission because additional absences for students, specifically staff, could be difficult for us with the substitute shortage that we're already dealing with and have been dealing with prior to the pandemic. We have continued, as the board knows, to try to hire additional substitutes. We talked about today, and we'll talk about a little bit later, increasing the salary for our substitutes. We're doing everything we can to get them to come here and help us, but we are having a difficult time with that. However, we also think that moving to a situation like this would mean less of a focus on mask enforcement for our staff and administrators and more time devoted to instruction, and not only more time devoted, but more time devoted to uninterrupted instructional time. It does allow for child and parent preference, which we have valued and tried to incorporate into our plans since our first plan. We hope that by doing this, we might lessen anxiety and general frustration or disconnection that's been experienced by those children who are struggling with their masks. However, it may increase anxiety for those who are more worried about the illness and are not struggling as much with the masks, as you heard from the public comment. There are other potential risks if the TRO is overruled. So if we do proceed with this, and I'm recommending that we don't go back and forth, if we do proceed with this and the board decides to transition to a mask optional environment, if the TRO is overruled, we could possibly put on ISB's probation list. That's the Illinois State Board of Education, and there are many schools that have been listed on that list. That's a process that the district would have to engage in terms of the state discussing with us our probationary status and measures that we would need to take to get off of that list. If we didn't, there's a potential for ISB to issue non-recognition status, which would mean a loss of general state aid, which is funding that we get from the state. And we potentially would not be able to participate in state level IESA athletic events. I don't know other legal risks because the attorneys are still kind of grappling with how to interpret this. And so there may be other legal risks that haven't been identified yet, and I would have to keep the board updated on those things so that we could continue to think about our choices. So I'll be asking the board to consider, number one, if you would be supportive of moving to a mask optional or mask recommended situation. And if so, I have two recommendations in terms of a timeline for transition. If we were to immediately start this process, as in tomorrow, it would not allow much time for administrators and case managers to work with families who are concerned with their medically fragile kids. I do know that some of our families have been looking for different accommodations. And we want to give our case managers time to work through that. I have a recommendation for a slightly delayed start, which would be February 21st. And the reason that I selected that was because the rest of this week, a lot of that is parent-teacher conferences, and it would be nice for our parents and teachers to be able to sit and discuss that and what, if any of our parents have concerns, and how we might be able to support them moving forward. And it would give us the week to put those plans in place. What my suggestion would be between now and the 21st would be situational masking. And the way I've defined it here is that the mask would be required for students in groups that would be not considered their cohort group. So we've been cohorting kids the entire time where they stay with the same group of children. In the middle school, they have 6 groups of children, but they're small groups. So we'd be looking at situations where more than one class are getting together, or we're having an assembly, some kind of large group indoor activity where it would be hard for us to say that we're keeping kids spaced appropriately, and we would be mixing students from their cohort. But in their classrooms, and as long as they're alone in the hallway as a class, or there's limited interaction with other kids for less than 15 minutes, they would have the option to not wear their mask. And again, that would be only until the 21st if we chose that option. So I do want to put this up here because this is, whatever we do here, we're not sure really the course of how this is going to go. And so the way we've kind of been looking at this is of 2 variables. Number one is the amount of vaccine or the availability of vaccines and how many of our students and staff are vaccinated. And then the level of community transmission. Although community transmission is low or lower than it was, we're still in substantial or high transmission according to the Lake County Health Department and CDC guidance. If we do get to the point where we're at low or moderate community transmission, I think we could even ease up a little bit more. And I think our parents who are concerned would feel more comfortable with having their own child unmasked. But I think really this is the way we need to start looking at this, as kind of a fluid situation, and maybe moving between these quadrants depending on what's happening in our community. I can't say that I can predict where we're going to be in a month or where we're going to be in 2 months. I'm really hoping we're in the green. But I think we've also been at different points in this where we thought we would be in the clear and we weren't. So I just wanted to put this out there as sort of a decision-making guidance for us as an administrative team to make recommendations that we think are appropriate based on what's happening. A few of our public commenters mentioned that I think we need to get to the point where we're kind of learning to live with COVID. And I do want to emphasize, we've tried really hard to accommodate as many community preferences and concerns as possible. As you recall, in the fall of 2020, when we opened our doors, we were one of the few districts in Lake County that did. And we had significant concerns about whether or not we were going to be able to keep everyone safe. And that was something that was keeping me up away from sleep at that time. And I'm not going to lie, I have some of the same concerns right now. But I do think that given the numbers that we have, given the vaccines that have been out, I'm really proud of the fact that we've offered vaccines in our district. We've also offered booster clinics right here on our premises. We have worked really closely with the health department to make sure that we've kept everyone safe. And I do think this is a recommendation that is sound based on everything that we've looked at this entire time. What I am asking for is that we really stay true to what we believe, which is that we are a kind and respectful community that values differing opinions. And I mean that because we have seen it already, unfortunately, with kids in the building. that kids are having a hard time being respectful of other people's choices. And I understand it. We need to help them. We need to transition them into this phase. It's a different phase. But during this time, it's going to be really important for all of us to reinforce that with kids, that whatever somebody chooses to do is their choice, and we should be okay with that. We do have kids who are anxious about taking their masks off. We have kids who are anxious to have them on anymore. And the fact of the matter is, we want to come out of this as friends and a community that can hang out together and be in classrooms together and be outside of school together, where parents are feeling that strong sense of community. And specifically, I want to include in that our staff. We haven't talked too much tonight about our teachers, but I would tell you that over the last 2 years, they've completely changed the way they do business on every single aspect of their day. The way they interface with kids, the way they interface with parents, the way they assess homework, the way they give homework, the way they take it back, the way they talk to kids online, their schedules, the people they work with, everything has changed. And we do have teachers, obviously, we've talked about parents and kids with medical concerns. We have staff members with the same thing. They're no different, and they will have different preferences with regard to this. We saw the staff data from speaking with our union. Some of those concerns really don't have to do with health. Some of it has to do with whether or not our kids will be able to tolerate each other, making different decisions and being kind to each other. That's been a bit of a struggle. So we need parents and community to be with us on that. We can only do what we can do here, and we need to all reinforce it at home and at school, and that we are one community that can make different choices, and that we would be okay with that, to keep everybody safe physically and mentally, and keep their social friendships healthy, and keep them feeling good about being in school. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
So for the children who could not be in school or would need some accommodations or would have to go remote, would it be feasible to put together plans for
Yes.
those kids and to do it in time for us to, if we were to go mask free?
By tomorrow, no.
Not by tomorrow, if it
By
were.
tomorrow, no. But in the week, I think we could. All these, I mean, so we're familiar with IEPs, we're familiar with individualized learning plans that we had to do when COVID started for all of our students with IEPs. Every single IEP needed to be rewritten based on the circumstances we were in. So our case managers are used to doing this, but they do need to talk to parents, and there does need to be a time for back and forth so that we can figure out what's actually feasible. Because what happens is that remote situation is going to go away for our kids that are sick, but we're going to have probably some students that will be on a permanent program like that. And we want to set it up right so that it makes sense for the kids in the classroom and the kids that are at home. So yes, we can build those plans. Our teachers are ready. They know that there's going to be some kids with those needs. And that's why we're trying to reduce the other load of this back and forth and in and out of remote learning for students who are short term.
And then there was a decent amount of teachers who were for masks, more who were not for it. What do you see as the fallout for the teachers who want masks if we go mask free?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I would say teachers in every school district are in a different spot. And I can tell you, I'm highly impressed with the staff here in Lake Bluff. I have been since day one. They are with us. They're working with us. They are not planning on going anywhere. They want to be here for these kids. We will be providing them the PPE that they want. If there's additional things that they want, we're coaching some individual situations and trying to support people the best ways that we can. This has been really tough. It's been really tough. And I say it a lot of times at board meetings, and you've recognized it. This is another shift and another transition. And I think we're all ready to start doing that. We want to get past it, but it's certainly going to be an adjustment again. And we will work with our staff to make sure everyone feels comfortable.
Will you clarify quarantine? So you had said if we knew somebody was positive, there will be a quarantine.
So if a student tests positive for COVID, they have to be isolated. They have to be out for the 5 days until they're, the 5 days is the isolation period. So that if you're testing positive for COVID from the day you test positive or when your symptoms start, that's when the 5-day clock would begin. And then when their symptoms resolve, they can come back. What's that? Vaccinated or unvaccinated, doesn't matter if you test positive. What we have been doing is if you're unvaccinated, you're treated as a close contact. We would not be quarantining at home as long as the student remains asymptomatic. If they have symptoms, they would have to go home until their symptoms resolve and they can come back with a negative test. But if the health department issues a quarantine for whatever reason, or identifies a case, then we would be listening to the health department for those specifically issued cases.
Okay. On the situational masking, if we were to go to that, would that be required of the children or would it be optional? Because
Yeah.
we've seen some kids that are not wearing them today.
Right.
And it's required. So how would we handle that?
Yeah, so we've been holding off on issuing lots of consequences for students who have refused to wear masks these last 2 days. But if the board gives us the direction that they'd like to go with situational masking, then we would require it during those times when kids are mixing with large groups of students. I actually don't think that would be too often, but we would work with our principals and teachers to make sure that we had a plan for that when we needed to do it. I think that that's a nice compromise. Because I think many of our families feel comfortable with the groups that kids are in. They're small, they're spaced out, they're well controlled. When they get into bigger groups indoors, it's a little bit hard to do that. And so it would give us a little bit of time to make sure our kids with medical issues have a solid plan, they feel comfortable, and that we know we're taking care of them. And then by the 21st, we would be able to just sort of put that aside and let people choose when they want to wear their masks.
That was my questions. I just have a comment. Go ahead, Ann, take over.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, so just so I understand, the situational masking would just be part of the transition
Yes.
until.
That would be
the
a bridge.
mask got- Didn't mean to cut you off, Amy.
I was just gonna say that, so with the nurse's office and wearing a mask. So we would give the option if someone didn't want to wear a mask, that the nurse would come to them,
Yes,
which is lovely, except that our nurses are so overworked.
that's true.
So I think that should maybe be under review if we do decide to not have masks.
Yeah,
'Cause
so
I
at
don't know how much more we
elementary,
can put
yeah,
on
we
them.
have 2 staff members at elementary. It'd probably be a little bit easier for somebody to leave. And plus we would need to look, I know that Nurse Sullivan is already looking for alternate places because really the issue is more like, where do you do it in privacy? So we would really encourage kids to wear a mask when they come into the nurse office. So that could be the private space and they have their tools that they need to support the student. But obviously if a student is refusing, we're not going to compromise the nurse's office. We would find a different spot.
Okay, I think that's very kind and going way beyond what we should have to do, just for the record. And that is the end of my questions. The only thing I do want to say before we do a vote, and I'm sure other people have questions, but I think as a community, we pride ourselves in Lake Bluff as supporting each other. And as parents, our kids learn from us. So whatever the outcome, I would certainly hope that we could walk away from this showing respect and dignity and some class. Because we want to have the community that we've always had and been proud of. And we need to remember that our children look up to us. And so they will take our lead. That's all. Somebody else take the floor. I'm done.
Well said, Amy.
I have one other question.
You do.
For like small group situations like speech or OT, things like that, that they're not with their classroom, how is that handled if they're not with their typical cohort?
Yeah, that would probably be
A mask.
considered not a large group cohort settings. The student would probably have an option. There may be some teachers though, in a small situation. I mean, some of our offices are very small. Okay. So if there's not more than 3 feet apart and the teacher does feel uncomfortable, we would look for an alternate setting if we can find one, or they might move them to a Zoom. I mean, without identifying personal health information, we do have people going through some medical situations that are concerned. And we're providing the N95 masks. We've obviously provided the vaccines and boosters, but as you can hear from public comment, and we didn't have any teachers speak, but I hear their voice in my head too, because, and I want to make sure that they feel comfortable and protected. Honestly, this isn't going to work if our teachers aren't feeling good about this plan. We need them to feel good about it so they can do the right thing for our kids. And so that is a priority for us. So we will work with teachers to find the right space if they aren't feeling comfortable. I didn't read it off of the slide, but we have parent-teacher conferences coming up. So if we do decide to delay until the 21st, I would ask that parents respect a teacher's preference to be in person. Like if the teacher is asking or wearing a mask, that we start with masks. And that if the teacher feels comfortable to let those masks or not wear a mask, then that be a conversation between the parent and teacher. And respectfully, that parent-teacher conferences aren't about masks. We really want to talk about your child and academics. And this is why could be good timing. So hopefully we have a plan out there and we can really focus on what we want to focus on, which is how students are doing. And keep this issue off the table.
I have some questions. Could we potentially go backwards? You were saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the matrix is coming from. I can't predict where this is going. I don't know if there's going to be another variant. I don't know if there's going to be something that really impacts kids in a much different way.
Well, we're not really high, like whatever it said, we're not in a good place.
Right.
So
the only other piece would be if we had, let's say we had another variant and another vaccine came out and it was like, this is the one we all have to have, then we would be low vaccinated again. You know, our vaccine rate would be down and our community transmission would be up. So we're really just trying to take a look at how protected are people
right.
and where are the community transmission rates.
Okay, I guess that goes back to then like state mandates and whatnot. So that could change as well or stay the same.
Well, it
since
could.
it's-
Yeah, I don't know how this case is going to turn out or what the appeals court is going to come up with that would be applicable to us. And I'll keep the board updated, but like I said, my recommendation, and this is based on the fact that I don't want to be going back and forth with kids. I think they've been through a lot. I want to make the plan. I want to make it thoughtfully. I want to take our time and make sure it's done well so that we can move forward confidently regardless. And I don't think this is, I'm recorded, but I don't think this is going to go forever. And if we have to work with ISB, like other districts in the state are doing that, then we'll do that. And if we get to a point where we're risking our children's participation in athletics or something like that, or we're risking a lot of funding, I'll bring that back to the board and tell you what we're dealing with, and we can make a different decision at that time.
Okay, so the 6 feet is still a set thing as well, or are we throwing that out as well?
Well, we've used 6 feet the entire time as like sort of you're out of the danger zone if you're at 6 feet.
Right.
It's not really a close contact number anymore. It's 3 feet now in a school setting. So I was just suggesting that if a teacher felt like they weren't safe, if a student was 2 feet away from them not wearing a mask, then we might look for an alternate location where they can space out a little bit more.
So will we be going back into the lunchrooms in large groups?
Yeah, we've
But
been in the
then-
lunchrooms anyway. The
Well,
lunchrooms,
Not all the kids, not all the grades at the same time, like not the entire first grade. goes
we'd have
at
to
the
look
same
at how
time.
we've been doing it. I'd have to talk to our principals about the best way to do that, but our lunch hours are less than 15 minutes as it is. And so they haven't been defined as, it's not less than 15 minutes as a total, but it's less than 15 minutes when they're unmasked by the time they start eating. So we can look at whether or not we can accommodate bigger groups in the spaces that we have. But we'd have to revisit that. And that would give us a little bit of time if we didn't start right away.
I want to pause for just, I just want to make sure Mark, who's not sitting around the table, has an opportunity to comment. So Mark, I don't know if now you want to, or just I don't want us to forget you're there.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So before we get into talking about where we all stand on this, I have one question. Somebody posted something in the Q&A that I thought was really interesting. The Chicago Sun-Times is reporting that Pritzker may be announcing as soon as tomorrow that he is repealing mask mandates in public spaces. It doesn't share any details. He hasn't shared any details. But if that was to happen, could you kind of outline your thoughts on how we would, how that would affect our decision-making?
It really doesn't. To be quite honest, because what I'm suggesting is that we move in that way. And I'm suggesting that there be a timing because of a specific purpose. I'm not just to back up a little bit, our first plan in July of 2020 was before any executive order for universal masking. We made our decision based on health guidance from CDC, IDPH, Lake County Health Department. We were doing that because we were bringing kids back and not every district was doing that. So the executive order is really, the repealing of the executive order really doesn't impact us because we came to the community saying, this is how we're going to bring kids in safely. We had community discussion about it. I still don't feel like this plan would be adjusted unless the Illinois State Board of Education came and said, you have to stop making masks mandated. We're already kind of there. So what I'm proposing that as early as tomorrow, we're already limiting the amount of masking that we're doing. But in my experience, the governor issues something and then there's a trickle down effect through various organizations until we figure out what it actually means for us. That's news to me.
Well, and also if there was no longer a mask mandate, that doesn't affect people having the option to still wear it for those people who do want to.
Right.
I wasn't expecting a definitive response. I just wanted to throw that out there for discussion point. Thank you.
I'm just going to go out and say this. I don't see how practically we can make any change for tomorrow. It's 9 o'clock at night. Kids in the elementary school are asleep. We've got, excuse me, can you please be respectful? I'm sorry. Excuse me. I sat here and I listened to the public comment. Can you please be respectful while I speak? We have families with special needs kids, students with special needs. They have plans that need to be worked out. Their families need to be comfortable with those plans. I don't know how we can make a change and spring this on them for tomorrow. I don't think that's fair. Those are our most vulnerable kids. That's all I have to say right now.
Yeah, Tim, I appreciate that. I agree with you for tomorrow. I think we're all seen, and we'll do this officially in just a minute, but it seems like we are mostly aligned. I'm hearing on accepting, this off-ramp to masking and finding a timeline for it. I would agree that tomorrow, and I'm mostly thinking about those medically fragile students that we have, whose parents we heard from tonight and others that we didn't hear from that I feel morally and ethically responsible to make sure that they are comfortable, and we need time, obviously, regardless of kids, being available tonight, we need time to work with those families. So I would not be in support of starting as early as tomorrow. I would be in support of starting, with your other target date or some other date that we come up with. But I would echo that, Tim, and I think, tomorrow is early for us being able to handle all the things that we need to handle. And if we have a date we're moving towards, we all need to compromise. We're compromising a lot of things, by having our kids in school. Some of us are comfortable with our kids in mass. Some of us could care less. I think this is a moment that I think, to your point earlier, Amy, our students will learn from us and we'll take our example, follow our example, and we need to compromise. And this seems like a compromise where we can accept a change that's significant, that's not without risk and liability on our behalf. To an extent we don't even know, and compromising, moving in that direction, while having some time to figure out what it is we need to figure out. So I'm glad you brought that up, Tim. I think that's a fair point.
I agree with you as well, Tim. I think that tomorrow is quick. I am in favor of moving towards mask optional. I do think that there needs to be an off-ramp, right? And so we need to get back to normal, whatever normal is, but to pre-pandemic, the way we used to be. I do worry about the kids wearing masks for all the non-COVID things, right? The anxiety, the speech delay, the lack of social interaction. I do worry about all of those things. But I also do worry about our medically fragile kids as well. And I want those families to know that we did hear them. And I would like to give them some time to get their heads around it, to make plans, to work with whatever admin they need to work with. So I am in favor of moving to the mask optional, but I do think tomorrow is too soon. So I would be more in favor of doing it on the 21st.
Any other thoughts or comments
Yeah.
specifically on timeline, Tim?
Yeah, I have, I guess more. I don't know if this is timing. I guess it is. Timing with regards to, and I know you're not being driven by the state mandates, but that is a concern for me. I don't know what's involved with the probation process. I don't want, I feel that's something we need to look at too. So I guess to me that if there's a stay, if there's the TRO, if there's a stay on the TRO, if the appellate court rules differently, I feel like in the 21st, that mandate could still be in place. I assume whatever, if the governor announces something, it's not going to be starting Monday, we're going to be mask free. I assume there's going to be some time in there. So I don't know if that has anything to do with timing. I'm not comfortable with tomorrow. As I said, I'm fully believe we should be moving towards mask optional. I assumed before Omicron came that we'd be starting this after winter break with mask optional, frankly, but I do have some concerns just with the legal aspects. When the governor's mandate came out in August, our lawyers put together a nice letter that made me feel warm and fuzzy that we were doing something okay. There's not that there now, and that makes me a little uneasy. And I don't, just from a liability standpoint of what we're opening ourselves up to by either not following the TRO, even though we aren't named, and it doesn't seem like we're required to follow that, but also by going against the mandate, if that opens us up to legal issues from students who may get sick. And I know that's hard to prove, but it's also out there, so.
Yeah, so as non-named defendants, we're sort of in a legal gray area right now. But I would absolutely commit to bringing updates on that case, and obviously where we are with everything else in the state, and where our position is relative to wherever the state is telling us we need to be, and if there are any risks, and as those risks change. We'll have a meeting on the 22nd. Another board meeting, so I can obviously bring any of those updates to the board, and we can evaluate at that point that and what we're willing to continue doing.
I just have kind of an overall, as we've had, the board members all have been reading tons of emails, tons of comments. So I kind of wrote out my thoughts, so bear with me. First, I want to thank Dr. Lealy, administrators, for everything you guys have done. As a parent and board member, I'm incredibly thankful for all you have done and continue to do for the kids. A lot has happened over the last week. There are varying opinions amongst parents, community members, and students. When I was elected to sit as school board member, part of that oath included listening to all sides. As a parent, I have my opinion, but in this seat here, I think I need to think about the district as a whole. During the last few days, myself and all the board members here have spent hours reading emails, keeping me up to date on current litigation, and even subbing when a school building was in need. I don't want to speak for anyone else sitting next to me, but the hours I spent were done because I respect the parents, the staff, and the residents of Lake Bluff. There is nothing we can say or decide here tonight that will make everyone happy, but I ask each of you here and those at home listening to be kind throughout this process. Be kind to your neighbor who may have a different opinion, be kind to the teacher who may have an underlying health condition, and continue to teach that same kindness and empathy to our children. One of the things that I love about Lake Bluff is the sense of community. Whether you are for or against masking, our children hear what we are saying. I want to assure everyone that in the end, the decision that is made either tonight or soon is not taken lightly and is made with the best intentions and the best for our community. And with that being said, I totally am in support of going towards non-masking, but I think we really need to consider those fragile students and teachers for that matter, and really think of a plan that's going to be best done. And it's, overnight is not the time to do it, and do it the right way.
Thanks, Lauren. It's not time for public comment. We'll have that in just a minute. Thank you. Lauren, thank you for that. And I do want to say, I think it might be a good idea for us to go around just one by one. You just stated kind of where you wanted to go, and just so we're not making any assumptions, if you don't mind, just kind of going down the line and asking each person just to indicate your support for the plan and or the timeline, and which timeline. Carrie, do you mind?
Yeah, I support the plan. I would prefer the timeline to be pushed to the 21st.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Ann?
Same. I support the plan of going to optional masking and think the 21st is the timeline to go.
Okay, it's exactly where I am as well, as stated earlier. Amy?
And I support the plan, and I think we should do it as soon as we can. And if we could do it before the 21st, great. And if they need until the 21st, then we do that.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Tim?
I'm fine with the 21st. That was something I kind of had in my head going into this. I do have some questions about, as we were wrapping up. Can you just so for and I guess maybe we should clarify, are we saying we're going situational masking tomorrow and mask optional to the 21st, or are we?
So I'm suggesting that between now and the 21st, that we would be asking students to wear masks at certain times of the day. We'd be asking all students to do that. I don't believe there are going to be a lot of opportunities for that, because we've really done a good job of cohorting kids so that they kind of stay in the same group most of the day. But that would be sort of the stopgap between just saying anytime a student wants to take off their mask, they can. That would start on the 21st.
So what would a typical classroom look like under a situational masking?
In a
Would kids
classroom
be-
setting, kids could take off their mask if they wanted to.
Okay.
As long as they were around that group of kids. Our desks are still spaced 3 feet
Right.
apart in most cases. It would give us some time though, if there are kids in a class where they maybe are grouped and that student's parent doesn't want them in a group anymore, they kind of ask to have the students separated. That would be something that we could arrange furniture a little bit differently. So get the PPE that we want before kids take it off at any time during the day. And I say mask optional because that's what we're doing, but we're still recommending masks. And I think as you can see, about half our community still believes that masks are an important mitigation measure. And so I would assume we're still going to have a lot of students in masks. So I say that because we can see that our community is really split on this issue. And so I think we probably will still have a great majority. This is not a prohibition on masks at all.
Right,
It's
yeah,
just allowing kids to take them off.
And I think that's an important piece you just said, because that was what you titled this as, is still the position is mask recommended. Mark, just to continue down the line here, if you wouldn't mind stating your thoughts and position.
Yeah, I would love to. But it's not, for me, it's not as simply as just stating my position. I need to give you some background. So, and like Lauren, I had to write some notes down because I have so many thoughts to lay out. I just want you to know that, first of all, I really appreciate Dr. Leali and her team and the countless hours you guys have put against this, and the thought and the work that goes into this, and the consultation that you've done, and the working with experts and following the science. I just really, really want you to know that is appreciated. I also want to thank all the parents, everybody who took the time to present thoughtful commentary, whether in person on Zoom or in writing. All total, we had 120, 130 comments. That's pretty amazing. That I've been on the board 11 years. That's the most I've ever seen by a long shot. And this makes me very proud to be a Lake Bluffer and to see so much passion for our community. That's amazing. Big takeaway is that this community is clearly split on this issue, and this board is going to have to help make a decision here. When I look at this, I look through this several lenses. I view this whole issue through. For me personally, my lifetime philosophy is to look at all this through a lens of kindness. I am sick of all the animosity and the divisiveness in our community, and I need to think of ways to view this for what is the most kind thing to do. I need to view this through the lens of what is best for kids. We always need to put kids' needs first. And I also need to put on a very traditional board hat. I have a fiduciary responsibility to the board, the district, and its assets. And some of these things can put some of that at risk. Through those lenses, I think of this issue in terms of several big areas. I'm sorry to drone on, but I just have to get a couple of these things out. I'm very concerned for several things. The medically fragile and vulnerable kids in our community. We do need a plan to protect. We do need a plan and the time to protect those students and their families. I'm very concerned for the unvaccinated in our schools, in our community, specifically all those kids who are under 5 and not eligible for vaccines. I am very concerned for those kids. All kids have been wearing masks for 2 years and are almost across the board socially, emotionally, and academically behind. Mental health issues are on the rise and many kids are really struggling. I'm very concerned that kids are already being bullied for choosing different masking options. I don't even have the words to express how disgusted I am that kids are being bullied by adults in our community who are trying to influence elementary age children from following their parents' decisions on masking. That's disgusting and you should be ashamed. I'm also concerned that there's too many possible changes in the next few weeks because of the governor, because of the stay, because of the appeals, and change is not good for these kids, no matter which direction it goes. I have legal concerns. Our legal advisors, to the best of their ability, are telling us that we're not bound by this ruling. They've been clear that the court ruling does not apply to Lake Bluff. But does that mean that the mandate applies? And what if we violate, like as Tim expressed, what if we violate that mandate? Are we liable? Will our insurance continue to cover us? Do we put district assets at risk? Does the board lose its tort immunity? There's so many big issues that are going on here. A number of people brought up collaboration with Lake Forest. You need to know that we try to collaborate with Lake Forest whenever it makes sense. We evaluate each opportunity on a case-by-case basis. But sometimes it doesn't always make sense. We are a unique community and a unique school. We do things what is right for our district. I also want to recognize when people say that cloth masks are ineffective. That's absolutely true. That's the science. But N95s and KN95s work, and we can make them available to students and faculty. I recognize that the science is evolving and not set, and we shouldn't expect it to be a binary on-off decision or that we make one rule and it sticks forever. I think we should recognize that many of the mitigation strategies we use are not followed to the letter by all students at all times. There's a big difference between what we plan for and what really happens on the ground in the buildings. It's not always as simple as saying this is the way it's going to work and then looking to have it happen. On the issue of public health, I feel that issues of public health are just that, they're public. They're not individual health decisions. Viewing this through the lens of individual health is selfish. I was raised to look out for others, to care for others, to help others who are less fortunate. Our individual decisions have consequences and impact others in ways that we may not have considered if we view this only through the lens of individual health. My perspective is that if all such decisions are left up to the parent, then we are not looking out for those among us who need protecting the most. An individual approach to public health disrespects the over 930,000 Americans who have died because of COVID. So finally, sorry for the delay. Where do I stand on Dr. Leali's proposal? It is my belief that coronavirus is here to stay. We need to be planning for the future that acknowledges this. I believe we need a structured plan that allows us for a phased in or phased out science and data metric driven approach to layering or delayering mitigation options, including masking. Therefore, in light of all that I've shared, I cannot support an immediate fully mask optional approach. I am generally supportive of working out a way to get past masking. I am supportive of Dr. Leali's plan, so long as it is phased in and not implemented tomorrow. I think Dr. Leali's matrix is really well thought out and meets all of my criteria for a structured approach. I am concerned that a February 21 start is too soon, and I would like to see situational masking start on the 21st and not tomorrow. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well stated, all of that.
I agree with Mark about the situational masking for tomorrow. I think it's the same as starting the whole thing tomorrow. To me, there's not a large difference between the two. So I have a problem with that for tomorrow. There's a day and a half left this week. There's a day and a half left of school this week, and I don't think it's fair to parents to spring this on at 9:15 at night.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Maybe it might help, Dr. Lealy, if you would talk about what it looks like in school now. These past 2 days, Monday and Tuesday being one consideration, but also what did masking look like in general and what really would be changing in your plan?
So prior to the Judge Grishow's order, we were vigilant on masking for all students, and teachers reminded students often. There were consequences when a student was openly defiant. They weren't major consequences, but many times administrators got involved to support a student. It was a restorative approach, but we definitely were holding tight to everyone needs to be masked at the times they need to be masked, which was almost all the time except lunch and being outside. In all practicality, there were a lot of reminders, which means there was a lot of unmasking to some extent. Either the mask would fall below the nose or fall completely off the face or onto the neck. And so it has become a difficult thing to manage. And if either of our principals want to talk about it, I'm happy to have you come up, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. So I will say, regardless of whether or not Lake Bluff was involved in the lawsuit, there was an abrupt change on Monday. I sent an email Sunday asking that we continue to adhere to our mitigations, and people did not. We had a very big change. Students came without masks. Students came telling us they were no longer going to mask. We had letters from attorneys, other organizations in the state. Quite frankly, it was a little scary for people who were confronted with those letters or with a student saying, I'm just not doing this anymore. You can call my parent. They've told me not to do it. And that puts our kids in a really difficult position. So I have asked our principals not to discipline harshly for a student who's saying they're doing something that their parent has asked them to do. And so it has been a marked difference since Monday. And there has been some bullying. And we've been trying to address that. We've been trying to give our teachers language around that to help them understand that every student is going to probably make a different choice. They've been talking to their parents, they have opinions. This is a really difficult issue. I don't know how to I can't overemphasize how difficult it is to be managing this and how difficult it's been to manage it. And I definitely understand the difficult feelings and the strong feelings on both sides. I do. And there are data and there is research and there are articles and there are experts and there are changing opinions and there are not changing opinions. And this has been our world for the last 2 years, 24 hours a day. So Monday was a big change. Do I think we're going to all of a sudden tomorrow get to a point where we can require kids to wear a mask and parents are going to be in full support of that? I think that's a reach.
And that's one reason I asked you the question the way I did, because having been in both of our buildings this week and prior weeks, my concern, so first of all, I want to state theoretically and in principle, I'm in total agreement with you and Mark in terms of worrying about starting the tomorrow in that regard, situational masking in that regard. However, having been in the schools, talked to kids, my own kids, other kids, to your point, I don't see it going back. As unfortunate as that might be for the reasons that happened, I think that it's sending mixed messages to kids to say we are mandating masking, but actually half your classmates don't have them on and there's no consequences. So can we mitigate that mixed message by starting tomorrow? That's the only reason I'm in support of it. And that mixed messaging for students in general has been all over the place because of COVID, and mostly because of us as adults mixing those messages, which is unfortunate, including this week with some of the behavior in the community. So I think that that's the only reason I'm in consideration of being okay with that plan. I'll just throw that out there and happy to have other comments on that.
You're saying the situational masking?
Yeah. It's the only reason I'm okay with situational masking starting tomorrow. I'm totally good with the off ramp and the 21st or whatever date it ends up being. Starting situational masking in theory and in principle makes me uncomfortable starting tomorrow. However, I don't think it's going back anyway.
Can we protect the
And-
fragile kids with situational masking tomorrow? You think we can do that?
I think we can try. We've been reaching out to those families. We've been trying to reach out to them already. So I think we knew this was coming.
Here's a question, and this is anecdotal. I know we can't take isolated cases, but I'm curious. Have any of our medically fragile students not come to school Monday or Tuesday? I don't know if we can answer that actually, because they're concerned about, do they now feel unsafe? Are there families in our district who now feel unsafe going to school because of the change?
Well, on top of that, we're accommodating those that are disrespecting technically law and disrespecting our decision previously. So will we accommodate the students that are respecting it and are not comfortable by switching classrooms? Or provide, I mean, it just seems like we're doing so much wasted work on both ends. It's frustrating that with the change we're going to have to deal with.
I know that this is difficult. I don't want to cut you off.
No,
I'm interrupting you. This is difficult, but I don't want to suggest that this hasn't been something we've been planning for a while.
No,
And
but it was forced
It was.
upon so many of us, and our kids were so taken aback by it that how do we accommodate them?
I think that's going to be a transition for us to work through with our teachers and in the classrooms. And
So a whole nother amount of work to do that has absolutely nothing to do with curriculum. And it's falls all on our teachers.
and our case managers, yes.
That's awesome.
I agree with Andy that after the last 2 days, there's no going back, because people are going to not wear masks tomorrow. And so then the children who are following the rules, it's really hard to explain that. And I'm not saying we should just pull the Band-Aid tomorrow, but I think we need to do some sort of situation. I think the situational is the middle ground. And it's a shame we have to do it that way. And it's a shame that it all played out this way, but it did. And so we're really left with few options. And I agree, like, we're accommodating the people who aren't doing what they were supposed to do. And I don't love that either.
I guess I just feel like we're putting it all on the teachers. And I don't feel comfortable with that.
Well, and actually, and that's why I agree with you. And that's why that's one of the only reasons I'm okay with situational masking starting tomorrow, so they're no longer in the middle of should they be enforcing or not. You know, I think that's the only reason really why I made the comments I did earlier, is because I'm tired of the teachers being in the middle and the students getting mixed signals and those things. So
But the unraveling of tomorrow and like even in the next like 14 days would be the same way. So
it would, yep. So to bring this back to center, we were near consensus. We have a couple things to think about. We've all given feedback to Dr. Leali's plan. I think there's general consensus for moving towards mask optional, right?
Yes.
Okay. There is general consensus with maybe a couple caveats, with the 21st being the earliest point for that. Is that anybody opposed to that statement? Okay. So we have a couple things, and please, anybody correct me if you're seeing this a different way, but we have to decide tonight, is this something that we're okay with leaving here with consensus to direct our administration to enacting this plan, or do we need a vote? And just procedurally, for those who are watching, we can't vote tonight. We would have to assign a special meeting to vote 48 hours from now, which would be,
And the reason we can't vote tonight is because it was not on the agenda. to
the
vote.
specific
It's
vote
a-
was not on the agenda. It was a discussion item. It just follows our typical process. So
Because the verdict came out on Friday, we would have
Right.
needed to change our agenda by Sunday to get it posted 48 hours in advance.
and we don't have to vote on this. I think we haven't voted on this in the past, so I don't think we have to vote, but I'm throwing it out there to the board to decide, is this something we feel that we need to vote on? And if so, what's the next step? Or are we comfortable based on the discussion tonight and Dr. Leali's plan to direct the administration to move forward into that? I think that's where we are at the moment. Does that sound good, Mark?
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's important to understand the distinction here, why we have not voted on this in the past and we are now. In the past, we didn't vote and we delegated authority to make day-to-day decisions to the administration because it would be unreasonable to expect the board to be able to meet every single time the law or state or local guidance changed. This is a very big picture issue. Not so much, I already see us having general consensus on the move forward. What I think the vote on is it also signals our willingness to accept the risk that comes along with the legal ambiguity associated with this. And despite what people think, there is legal ambiguity here and there is potential risk to the district. And that is the biggest picture types of issues that this board needs to vote to approve. If we approve moving forward, then we're approving that this district takes some legal risk and we're willing to live with that. So that's my perspective on that.
Yeah, if the governor's mandate was completely gone and there's no gray area, I wouldn't necessarily think we'd need to vote on this. But because of that, I think it would be best for us to vote, since we, as Mark said, since we are potentially taking on that additional risk.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments?
Dr. Leali, do you have a opinion on whether or not we do this by board vote or not?
No, I don't have an opinion. We could do both.
I think you can do both. I think you can, we've given Dr. Leali direction and we vote to shore it up in a couple days. We would need to schedule we don't need to call it an emergency board meeting, but a short notice board meeting. We have to give at least 48 hours to post an agenda and a meeting date and time. But we can probably gather a quorum to make a vote to make this official in a few days' time.
So meaning that the direction we've given tonight, the administration could start moving forward with that, but then we would make it official.
That would be my perspective on that, yes.
I'm in agreement with that too.
And I'm in agreement with that
I am
as
too.
well. So Lauren, Carrie,
I'm going to be out of town, so you just need a quorum, right? I just want to make sure.
yeah, but are you okay with that process moving forward? Okay.
Zoom.
She doesn't want to do that. Okay, so it sounds like after some discussion, we have some consensus on, and let me just restate it so we're clear. We are in support of Dr. Leali's plan to move forward into a mask optional environment almost universally and as stated. We would like the date for that in terms of the timeline to be not starting tomorrow, but to look at option 2 is starting right now, set for the 21st. We have decided that as a board, we feel that we should vote on it as opposed to just move forward with consensus. But in the meantime, so to schedule a special meeting 48 or more hours from now and to vote on it at that time. But in the meantime, in those 48 hours to move forward with the plan. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes. Yes.
Any comments, final comments on that piece? Okay, so I think we can move on to the next item. We do have other items to discuss tonight. I just want to say thanks to the board and to Mark remotely and to Dr. Leali and the administration, everybody tonight for having it and for everyone who made comments live in person over Zoom, the 90 or so we had written. I think this was a healthy discussion and I think we got to a place that we're all comfortable with. And it's not an easy thing to do. So thanks to everybody on that. Okay, we are going to move into item B. That was a long item A, license staffing discussion for 22-23. And I don't know if I'm turning this over to Jay or to Dr. Leali.
We're going to work on this one together. So essentially this time of year, we always present our staffing plan for the next school year. This includes our full-time equivalent numbers and grade levels and enrollment projection. And this is so that we can make sure that the board approves of how many teachers we will have and the positions. So I'm going to let Jay take it from
Sure.
here.
So we are projecting the enrollment at the elementary school to increase next year from 562 to 586. But looking at the way the grade sections shake out, we are expecting the to have one less section, so we would have one fewer grade level teacher. And that opening would allow us to maintain the additional math support person that we hired this year. So we hired a math support specialist to provide math instruction due to some of the math challenges after the pandemic. Some of our kids were not progressing as well in math. And so we hired, that was a one-year position that was funded through COVID relief dollars federally. We'd like to keep that position for an additional year. And because we were down a section of classroom level teacher, then that's a no change in total staffing. We also, Tracy had talked last meeting about the need to add a pre-K class. So we have already been through that, and we would have an additional pre-K teacher needed. So that would increase 1 FTE. And so that's a net one add because we're holding the math support and the classroom teacher offset. And then the board also previously approved an additional district administrator, director of technology. We just, many board members were participated in the interviews we just had, and we're very close to hiring that person. So awesome. And then we also do need some additional speech pathology work that we have outsourced. And so that brings the total increase to 2.2 FTE for the year that we're asking for next year. Middle school staff would remain unchanged.
Thanks, Jay, as always, for making this so clear for us all to compare the previous year to. Any questions for Jay? So just to clarify, this is something we'll vote on at the meeting on the 22nd to
Yeah,
approve?
this is
Okay.
just a prelim look.
Great.
We will update it if anything changes, but we'll bring it for approval at the the last meeting in February.
Okay.
Just a
Fantastic.
quick question, sorry. It may be too early since pre-registration just started, but are the numbers for pre-K so far supporting the need for the second group or is that something?
I'll let
better
Tracy
for-
answer that.
Okay.
We can already fill the first sections
Oh,
of
great.
pre-K 3 and pre-K 4.
Okay.
So we think that we should be able to fill another pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. The memo that I've created also has a scenario where we could create a pre-K 3/4 class and do a half-day section. So I did lay out some two possibilities there.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, then moving on to item D, non-licensed salary discussion. Jay, back to you.
So our total non-licensed staffing plan is about flat, but there's a little bit of up and down in the mix. We will need some additional occupational therapy from our current staff member. So her FTE would be increasing from 0.5 to 0.3. There's a 1.0 teaching assistant that is the pre-K teaching assistant that we talked about. Tracy presented at the last meeting. I'm expecting that we will go back to normal lunch and recess next year and not need the additional supervision that we require today because kids are eating in the classroom. And then we currently have 2 health aides that support our nurses. We actually tried to hire one at the middle school and we were unable to hire an aide, so we've been without all year. So I'm removing it from the staffing plan, but that position was never filled. We are keeping the elementary health aide in the plan because we don't know whether or not we will need that position for next year. So we want to keep the opportunity to have that should we need it in the future.
Okay, any questions for Jay? All right, Jay, thank you very much. And item E, district calendar discussion for 22-20.
You skipped D.
What's that?
There's the.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Non-licensed salary discussion.
Thanks.
Sorry, it's getting late. Sorry
No,
about that.
that's
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah. We did have a discussion in closed session about specific salary adjustments we would like to make for certain classes of employees, teacher assistants and custodians, as well as some individual adjustments for next school year. The class adjustments for teacher assistants, custodian and maintenance, as well as our substitute daily pay rate, we would like to increase as of March 1st. And those are based on our inability many times to recruit staff and retain them. And so those plans that we discussed will be up for a vote on February 22nd at our next meeting. So if there's any questions or comments or anything the board would like to offer at this time for discussion on that.
I can offer a comment. I just want to say that we need to do something to stop the bleeding. Our district, as well as all the districts that are surrounding us, are really struggling to keep staff. We're an awesome place to work, but if it's really easy to go somewhere else for $5 more an hour, that's a no-brainer for a lot of people. And we need to incentivize people to stay with Lake Bluff. It's the disruption by changing staff is really very difficult on kids, and it's really hard to attract people at our current rates for many of our categories of employees. I'm financially conservative, and I hate to sometimes hear myself suggest this, but I completely support the discussion we had in closed session about making positive salary adjustments for the classes of employees we have discussed and are on the table here.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Any other comments or questions on that item? Now on to E, district calendar discussion 22-23.
So the proposed calendar for 22-23 is in the board packet, and we're going to be discussing it tonight and then approving it at our next meeting. Essentially, the first institute days for teachers will be August 18th and 19th. First day for students will be Monday, August 22nd. That will be an early release day. And then the last day of school will be Tuesday, June 6th, with our emergency days, June 7th, 8th, 9th, 12th, and 13th. We do have a couple of additional holidays next year. We have a November holiday for Election Day that we are required to take, as well as Juneteenth, and that will affect our summer school programming. All early release days are in the calendar as the first Wednesday of the month, as is typical. And parent-teacher conferences are again in October and February.
Great. Pretty standard from years past. I'll say the one question I've gotten is when spring break is.
Right,
That's
sorry.
March 17th through 24th,
I didn't
2023.
talk about winter break and spring break yet.
Okay.
So we continue to stay aligned with the high school on the winter break, which is beginning on December 19th and going through December 30th with our first, I'm sorry, I'm looking at a different, going through January 2nd with an institute day on January 3rd and an early release day for students on January 4th. And then our spring break, again, aligned with the high school, will begin on the 17th and go all the way through March 24th.
Questions or comments on that item? And again, voting on that at the 22nd, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And finally, item F, our board meeting calendar for 22-23.
This is just a proposed list of our meeting dates and times. And again, we approve this so that it can go up on the website and then we can make adjustments if we need to. Obviously, we have the ability to cancel meetings if we need to, but they need to be added 48 hours in advance unless it's an emergency meeting. So we did adjust, I think, did we adjust the June date a little bit to make sure that we have ample time to pay the bills that come in June, because then there's a break. There's a pretty big break between July, right?
Yes.
June and August.
Well, that's why we do that early morning July
Sunny,
date,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so but sometimes we get some bills that come in late June that we want to make
We
sure we
push
pay.
back the June board meeting 1 week because we often get bills that are due July 1st for the new fiscal year, and we don't have time to pay them. So
You like to pay things on time.
We do.
Great.
Good thing.
Thank you, Jay. Any other comments or questions on that item? Okay, great. Oh, Tim.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if this is the right time for it. At a previous meeting, we had discussed if this was the best venue for our meetings. So I don't know if that's something we want to discuss or if logistically it makes sense to move to one of the school buildings or anything. So
Let me make a note. We can add that as a discussion item if you'd like, a future discussion item.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Future discussion item for that.
And I don't know if it needs to be before we approve the plan, but I don't necessarily have an opinion.
That's a good, thanks for bringing it up. Okay, any final comments, questions? Great. We will move back into item 7, which is our second public comments period. Just want to remind everybody that this is our second period. We are still going to be mindful of the 2-minute limit and strict adherence to this, please. And if anybody in the room, you can go ahead and do that now. Please state your name and we'll get to the people on Zoom.
Hello, Michael Maknicki again. I think we all valued everybody's input tonight and really value the careful deliberation amongst the board and taking everybody's in consideration and really aiming to do this correctly. I completely understand the hesitancy with the short notice for the families that need to make more serious decisions on how to accommodate their students, especially the medically fragile. And I don't want to seem insensitive. I completely empathize with those families, but it seems like there's a consensus that cloth masks are very ineffective in a virus transmission prevention measure. And I'm also hearing from our superintendent that every day is a struggle with reminding students to keep their masks on properly, whether they're on their neck, their chin, and nose is exposed. So that's leaving me to wonder how much of a environmental change is going to be taking place when we're removing a very ineffective mask. And, you know, with the reality that they weren't being worn properly most of the time in the first place. With that said, I think the KN95 masks is the best option for the medically fragile families. I share the opinion that maybe tomorrow's too early. And that's coming from my family has the opinion of making masks optional as soon as possible. I know that the 21st is much too late for a lot of families in our community. And I want to try to avoid the chaos that has been taking place in other school districts regarding, you know, mixed messaging and everyone kind of drawing their own conclusions on how to proceed on a daily basis.
We do need to start wrapping it up.
Sorry about that. I think Monday is a good compromise. It gives 5 days notice. It's Valentine's Day. What better occasion for our kids to show kindness and love and see each other's smiles.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any other comments from inside the room? Okay.
Hi, Catherine Marsubian again. I just wanted to thank you for all the consideration you took from all angles, and I'm really looking forward to encouraging my sons to continue forward with respect and kindness with all the changes that are going to be taking place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else inside the room? Go ahead, Lane.
Hi, Lane Bennett. Thank you all. I appreciate all your time and effort these last few days. I know, Anne, I heard you were a substitute at the middle school. Lauren, I know you're at the elementary school helping out, so thank you. I also would like to suggest Monday, February 14th for mask optional. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. Anybody else inside the room? Okay, great. Nate, I know we have at least one on Zoom, right? Clayton, you're with the board.
He's
muted.
Clayton, you're muted if you're trying to speak. Is there anybody else in the? Okay. Clayton, can you hear? All right, well, in the interest of time, I think we've given an opportunity. If you would like to submit a written comment, certainly after the fact, we can make sure that gets included in the record, correct? Okay. Great. That ends our public comment period. At the end of the meeting, we're going to move on to adjournment. So may I have a motion to adjourn February 8th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting at 9:43 p.m. Central Time?
So moved. Second.
Can we do all in favor with Mark? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great.